I'm Luke Story. For the past 22 years, I've been relentlessly committed to my deepest passion, designing the ultimate lifestyle based on the most powerful principles of spirituality, health, psychology, and personal development. The Lifestylist Podcast is a show dedicated to sharing my discoveries and the experts behind them with you. Mark, welcome to The Lifestylist, man.
Thank you, Luke. Really great to be here.
So I want to start, Mark, by asking you, as of today, right now, you flew into Austin to do this podcast. Thank you for coming to do so.
Absolutely.
What's the most exciting thing in your life, personally, professionally, or otherwise right now?
You know what's great? Can I say this? So this is the question I ask everyone from the bank teller to the girl in the grocery line is, what's the most exciting thing in your life? Because I think that embodies, like, a lot of people are so unprepared for that. But it makes them think, right? Like, oh, hold it. Is something exciting? Oh, yeah. And you got to dig sometimes, right? But for me, right now, this is amazing. The opportunity to be able to share the gospel of Neurotropics with people that get it, who have meaningful lives and know that performance is a huge part of that. One. And then probably number two is I've got this loving woman at home who is right now doing a bunch of formulations for me, cooking things up so that when I get back, we can tweak the stuff and create something new for you. So those are two really valuable things. Yeah.
Well, I'm excited.
Just for you. Just for you, Luke.
I love that.
That's it, man.
Well, you know, that question was somewhat spontaneous, just because you're an enthusiastic person. I was like, I bet he's up to something cool. But it's also similar when you ask someone, like, you know, what's your passion versus what do you do, right? Because oftentimes what someone does for their vocation isn't necessarily their passion. And it's funny, often when you ask people that, they do pause. They're like, God, I've defined myself by what I do for so long in some cases that what am I passionate about? So, yeah.
Yeah, I think we get locked into that. This is my somewhere between my 18th and 19th company that I've built since 85, 86.
I'm sorry.
I know, right? Exactly, yeah.
I've built two companies, and I meet people like you, and I'm like, what? How do you do that? Building one company in one lifetime is a daunting task for some of us. So.
What's funny is that I love the mechanics of, I love the startup phase, and I love the selling phase. My former wife, before she passed away, she said at one time I was completely burned out. And she said, you're really good at starting these things and you're really good at the exit. It's that thing in the middle that you don't like.
Operations?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Right?
Yeah, not my favorite thing in the world. So you were you in the Air Force?
I was, 6 years.
Okay, you're in the Air Force, then you get into bodybuilding.
Mm-hmm.
I've studied up on you, as you can see. And then I kind of wanted to set up the framework for what has become your passion and your expertise. But it's kind of a heavy point to start, so I'm just going to do it anyway, and you can elaborate as much as you care to or not to.
Dude, it's great. It's all good.
But you got into what we're going to be talking about today, which is brain function, brain health, performance, and all of that, partially as a result of your former wife passing away of an overdose.
Correct.
And I've heard you talk about that publicly, so I'm not
getting too awkward. You're not broaching anything that's weird.
But what I did wonder about that was, how did you, aside from what we're going to get into, how did you cope with the grief of that?
That's a great question. One is I literally journaled it on Twitter. Like, it became my expression engine for that. The other was I've got a deeply spiritual past. My dad was a monk. He was a Trappist monk when he was 15 to 18 years old. So, and he actually kind of coached me into getting into Buddhism when I was very young, or at least exploring it. I didn't become a Buddhist, but I studied transcendental meditation. I had a coach when I was 8 years old that taught me how to do TM.
Oh my God. You had some good karma.
I had some incredible people around. I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I had a genius MIT Xerox PARC graduate at the end of the street that taught me electronics from the time I was 5 years old.
Yeah, didn't you like invent a laser when you were a kid?
I did a laser when I was 9.5 years old. I built a helium neon laser, like building mirror mounts and riding my bicycle down to the local neon sign company, handing him a blueprint that I had drawn by hand and a ruler, and then $109.73 in bills and change. Going, will this be enough? They call my dad and they go, is this kid real? And he said, yeah, he's real. So, and then, I think they took care of it without charging me anything.
So you think that you're being introduced to spirituality and meditation and just kind of having been acclimated to a bigger picture, maybe a bigger life view, is what has helped you, process through that grief and move on to become the really happy-go-lucky guy you are today?
Yeah, and I think that I had at one point gone through a very deep depression when she and I were married, early days of our marriage. And because I was hypothyroid and I was living in the Northwest. Those are two really bad combinations. You don't get any sun there, and right, so your D levels are off and your thyroid is calcifying. And so I'd been through that. I knew what depression felt like, and I knew what getting out of depression felt like suddenly becoming hyper aware of who you are and your physiology and neurology, and then being able to leverage that into businesses and things. So when she passed away, it wasn't instantaneous. It was a 10-year journey for her. She had our last child. All of our children were born at home. So a hot tub, a birthing chair for my son, and then a couch for my daughter, who still works for us today. My youngest daughter, Livy. Shout out to Livy, Renegade the rapper. And so the midwife, Tish, my wife at the time, tore a little bit. They handed me snips to do an episiotomy. I said, no, I'm not changing my wife's vagina. I like it just as it is. And so she tore a little bit, and they gave her 4-oxycodone. And I don't think we have to go to the Sackler family to know how bad that turned out for a lot of people. So 10 years later. And the thing with those kinds of destructive meds, not saying that it can't be used responsibly, but not for most of us, or for many of us, is that it's a Band-Aid, and the sore keeps getting bigger. It's infected. And as it keeps expanding, you try to find other things to try to cover it, and eventually it takes over your whole being, right? So
I'm sadly very familiar, yeah.
You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, you and your business partner, Matt Gallant from Bioptimizers, who I'm sure we'll reference at some point, we both share that in our past, and thankfully are a couple of the guys left standing in the aftermath of addiction. It's just, it's a horrible, I don't know whether it's a disease or what it is, but it is something, you're right, that once you're in the grasp of it, doesn't get better on its own. I've never met an addict or alcoholic that's just like, I'm kind of outgrowing this. It's like, no.
Right.
If it's really got you, it's really only a matter of time before it gets you into serious trouble, untimely death, or you have the divine providence and opportunity to get out of it, which is the case for myself, thankfully. Knock on wood.
I know. Isn't that funny? Matt's been clean for 13 years now. He just got his 13-year chip recently. And an amazing human being, and one of my closest friends. But he does reference it. He does he lets me know that those are things that could be dangerous. Those are things that we want to watch for, and we want to be careful because we're in the business of helping people to, we're into biological optimization, right? That's our thing. That's what we do. And we do neurological optimization as well. And if we venture too close to the edge, it could be ineffective or have negative consequences on people. And we want to make a monumental contribution to every life we touch. So the only way we can do that is to keep it on the level where it's as close to the human organism and as healthful and vital to the human organism as possible. We just want to make you better with what you already got and give you some of the tools that you need to make yourself better.
So when your wife passed, and you started becoming aware of or interested in compounds, molecules, et cetera, that could help the brain, did you start out due to the impetus of wanting to help people that were in her position?
Yeah. There was, when I was somewhere between 10 and 12 years old, my sister Karen, my eldest sister, an amazing woman, had just come back from Woodstock. And She was young herself. I'm one of 6 kids. We were 8 years total, 6 kids in 8 years. So my mom was constantly pregnant for
God.
most of a decade, right?
Wow, God bless her.
Yeah, amazing. She was great. But she asked me to come to her room and then close the door and watch the door. And then she wrapped a surgical tube around her arm, a little bit, got a vein up, and so I got to see that live, which is kind of traumatic when you're, I think it was 10. I was 10. And it just kind of blows your mind about what people are capable of doing. And I saw her eyes roll back in her head, and she fell back on the bed, and and had her trip. And I was watching the door so that parents didn't come in, or brother and sister didn't come out, those things.
You were getting trained in codependency, young Jedi.
Thank you. Yeah, you're right? A master class.
Yeah, caretaking 101.
Yeah, it was pretty fun. So I'd seen that, and I'd seen her journey through it. And then we found her on the street I swear this comes back to Tish, is we found her on the street dying of black tar heroin decades later, 28 years later, in Portland, Oregon on Burnside, which is kind of like the main street that runs through Portland. And I think she weighed 85 or 90 pounds at that point. She was 5'9". You could see her veins, and she was rotting from the inside out. And so we tough loved her. Each one of the family members took her in for a month to a year, and just helped her kind of see who she could be, and that we were unconditional love, addict or not, unconditional love. And then she tapped into Paramahansa Yogananda, right? Autobiography of a Yogi. And that was kind of the catalyst that helped her to leap from that to non-addictive practices that were helpful, like meditation.
Wow.
The kind of stuff I got to do when I was really young,
yeah,
thankfully.
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned that. Sometimes with us addicts, sometimes you just don't make it, right? And you never see the light. It's just
Right.
it's not your karma or destiny. I mean, it's really, really sad, but I've watched people that have a shot at getting clean, and they just don't. They can't. It's like their ego is too fortified. There's this armor that you can't get through to the real person behind that. But there are some of us that just have one little seed like that. And that book, and I had a similar experience. Someone gave me a book called I Am That, which is a really dense text, basically on non-duality. And I couldn't read it because it was too dense and it was just above my head and my
Like esoteric at that point?
Yeah. But that was there was something in that book that I knew was powerful and I knew was true. And that was really the first seed that I had, that led me to the understanding that there's more to this life than our suffering, right? And that there's a way out. And that eventually led to a bunch of chain of events that I won't get into. And here I am sitting here today, 25 years later, and never went back into addiction, thankfully. But yeah, so back to your wife and your sister.
Right. So I saw this I saw this thing that happens to people when they're in the grasp of addiction. And I think the grasp of addiction, which we've heard over and over, right? It's kind of a term, it's a meme at this point, is true. It's like there's a thing holding you from being who you really could be if you weren't serving that other master. And so I knew that I had to do something. And back in the 90s, I had explored working with an acetylcholinesterase inhibitor, which is a compound that basically keeps the acetylcholine flowing in the synapse of the brain. And acetylcholine is the neurotransmitter for thinking and learning. So, what my goal back then, in fact, I even said this on Dave Asprey's podcast. He said, well, how'd you get into Nootropics? I said, well, I was Dirk Pearson and Sandy Shaw, these old guys that used to do this life extension thing. And I was doing this stuff to get people off coffee. And I didn't realize that I was talking to the coffee man.
He's like, don't get people off coffee.
Yeah. It was pretty funny. But anyhow, and I saw the performance increase in this small group of Intel engineers. I said, wow, these guys really, really upped their game by slowly, titrating down off of coffee and upping their acetylcholinesterase, inhibitor levels to the point where they were optimized. So they didn't need coffee to get the adenosine receptor activity going, to block the adenosine receptor so they felt wakeful. They were wakeful automatically when they woke up in the morning. And they didn't go through energy spikes and valleys, right? Peaks and valleys. They had this nice calm energy level that was really good all day long. And a lot of them told me that they could work until 10 or 11 at night and not feel fatigued, and then go to bed and go to sleep because they didn't have caffeine in their system, and have great dreams, vivid dreams. That's another advantage of acetylcholinesterase inhibitors. So I had been doing that stuff back then, and then I built a nutrition company around human growth hormone expression back in the 90s for a couple of years. I had a mentor who was University of Oregon, PhD in neurobiology, and so he was a great mentor on that stuff. And then we fast forward 10 years later, and Tish, is on the ground, and the paramedics are putting a 6-inch needle in her heart to try to restart it, and so you're going, fuck, this is not good. And so from there it was, okay, so I played a little bit of the human growth hormone. I played a little bit of the acetylcholine game. I knew about nootropics, but they were kind of unobtainium. You could buy 3 months worth of a weird Russian experimental chemical, right, for one person, but that's not something that's going to affect the rest of the life, a lot of people. So I started experimenting with amino acid chelates and amino acid extracts. So pyroglutamic acid was the first one. So pyroglutamate and amino acid chelate. And I realized that I could dramatically improve for a short period of time if I took it at night before I went to bed, because it put such a enzymatic activity in the brain. It put such a heavy load on the brain that it would actually help you fall asleep. You would have pretty vivid dreams. You would wake up at a proper time, 6 or 7 or 8 in the morning, and then you'd be really great. You'd be really alert, really on your game for about 2.5 hours. Then you just plateau and eventually fall off a cliff of performance. So it's, okay, that's enough of a piece that I can grab that. So I started combining those molecules with other molecules, thinking if I could get the next phase of that, whatever that is, maybe I could create something that would have a positive impact on people that wanted to feel something more, feel something better. And maybe that would be a key to addiction issues. It wasn't a key to addiction issues. But what was as I kept going down this path, and for the first 4 years, I did 3,000 different formulations. And I was
during this time. Did you have a
job?
Yeah, that too. Did you have a home lab? I mean, I'm picturing like beakers and you in there with the white lab coat and putting everything's together.
I had worked with a guy named David McGinnis who lives in New Braunfels here, and David had formed a company called prweb.com. I had hacked his platform back in the early 2000s, and he had called me out on it and then asked me to be an advisor to his company because he'd noticed that I built and then I sold my companies. And he goes, would you help me package this thing if I ever needed to? And would you be an advisor? And your SEO stats, search engine optimization stats were off the charts and things. And so we worked together. Great guy, great mentor, great friend, super great friend. I was a company called newsworthy.ai doing news coupled with social media and coupled with influencers. It's really cool. So, and David said we'd sold a company for $28 million. And so he took a picture of a house that looked like a Frank Lloyd Wright type of design. And he turned around, and he knew my aesthetic, right? And then he turned around and took a picture of the ocean. And he goes, I'm going to fly my jet down, pick up you and the kids. You can tell me if you like this place. So yeah, I built a lab there and started. In fact, the lab took over the living room, and then it started kind of like migrating all over the house. And we had a recording studio. My son was heavy into music in his band, and so we had that going on, which was always an important part of my life, music. And and so from there, just doing these formulations. I owned a software company at the time with the founder of Century 21 Real Estate. And so Marsh Fisher was his name. And we built brainstorming software to help people think creatively. So Drew Carey used it. Pastor Rick Warren in Southern California used it. And then every technology company. This is embarrassing to say, but Hallmark writes their cards with my software.
Really? That's funny.
It's embarrassing.
That's funny.
But you know what I mean?
Reminds me of how many times I've been like, I got to get a card for so-and-so. And I go on, I'm flipping through. I'm like, I would never say that. I would never say that. It's like, what would I say? Okay, I end up with a blank card.
Exactly.
Always, and I just,
So Shoebox Greetings actually came out with cards that they're blank on the inside, right? And so they had a cool exterior. It was just artsy. And then on the inside, you could write whatever you want. Yeah. And I still do that today. It's a main thing. But anyhow, so I had a resource of almost 400,000 people that were really smart that used my software, or at least a subset of them were really smart that used my software. And so I sent them samples of literally a blank test tube. Actually, it was like this, looked like this, a blank test tube, with a powder that tasted like crap and said, mix this with water, take it, and tell me how it feels, how it makes you feel, and how you perform. And go to this link on this database, online database, and use this database, and let's get you, and tell me what the results are. And so over thousands of these tests, we finally figured out that the combinations of molecules was super important, right? And the ratios of the molecules and the percentage and the minimum viable dose versus maximum potential dose, right? But more importantly was those factors combined with your physiology, the meds you're on, the vitamins you take, your meditation practice, your exercise practice, right? Your food and diet. And once we figured that out, that we needed to customize, that's when the aha moment came. So.
Yeah, and I can't wait to get into the customization because you alluded to this, but we didn't go too deeply into it. It's pretty typical that when an addict or alcoholic gets sober, their real problems begin in a sense, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because then it's like
stark reality.
All of the underlying emotional issues, trauma, PTSD, all the wreckage from that period of time in which you were addicted, but it's also just the brain, man. I mean, I remember when I was first sober, it's just like fight or flight or just comatose, brain dead, and I really didn't think I would ever recover from that. And I don't know that I have totally, but thanks to people like you formulating cool shit, I'm getting there. So when I found out about smart drugs and nootropics, as you said, I was going on the dark web and, it's like
hunting stuff out.
Super, super shady. You wondered if they're ever going to send it to you. It shows up in some weird, brown package.
Unmarked and
Yeah, and also tasted horrific. You reminded me, I have a big old, a kilo of paracetam downstairs because I just buy everything in bulk. And
you bet.
I would never try to give that to someone because I just take a teaspoon and just stir it up in water and I chug it down, and it's an incredible, nootropic, but it tastes like, ground aspirin or something. It's not palatable in any way. But I started to use that and modafinil and different things, and notice, like, especially in the beginning of starting this podcast 6 years ago, I would notice days when I just woke up and did my normal routine. I would have a terrible time, not all the time, but if I was sleep deprived or something, with word recall.
Yep.
And so I'd start taking paracetam and find myself in a conversation, whether recorded or not, and pull something out from way earlier in the conversation, and circle things back and connect loops. And it was really fascinating to just observe how over time, and a lot of, lifestyle changes, obviously, and exercise and sun and diet and all the things. But seeing that there was absolutely a quantifiable result from using things like that. But it has also been and continues to be kind of hit or miss. And what works for me is not going to work for the next person because I found something like paracetam, that's my racetam of choice. I've given it to people and they either don't feel anything or they feel like they just did speed, know? And they're just, they're just not comfortable. Or else they're like, that did nothing. So I think where we're going to go in this conversation is really interesting in that you have evolved this in terms of supplementation into something that's much more customizable. Because the layperson like me doesn't even know what this thing's doing to my brain. I just know, my memory's a little better when I take this pill in the morning. But then if you don't mix them right or you do too many or you combine different things, then you kind of hit that, diminishing return wherein you're hungover the next day, or there's, as you said, that afternoon crash. And it's just really difficult in my experience. And I'm pretty good at figuring things out. It's really difficult to nail it.
Yeah.
So maybe before because I really actually today, that's why I have your products up here. And, forgive me, people, if I make a product-centric podcast, but when I find something really cool, it's like, I want people to know about it. It's just
awesome.
I would feel like a dick if I didn't tell people that you can perform. You can
Luke, I would call you a dick if you didn't.
You can, people, I think many people don't realize you can actually choose your mood.
Absolutely.
And you can choose your state. And there are other ways to do it through breath work and meditation and all the things. And I do all of those things too. I don't want people to think the only way to change your state into a more positive state or a focused state, depending on what you're going for, is by taking something exogenous. But if it's there. But before we get into the formulations, and I really want to pick your brain on some of the obscure ingredients, because I read the ingredient deck on these things and I can't pronounce any of it. I'm like, what the hell is this? So I just personally am curious, but maybe as a framework so people just kind of have a a scaffolding on which we can build this kind of body of knowledge that you've amassed is the different neurotransmitters, like you mentioned acetylcholine, and I'd like to explore GABA and serotonin and dopamine. If you could kind of give us an overview of the different brain states that are created by these different neurotransmitters, and then maybe that'll lead us more into specifics on how we can actually dial those in.
So have you ever seen a linear EQ meter?
Yes.
Of course you have, right?
Yeah.
Right, you dial them up and down. That's the same with your neurotransmitters. And there's a cascade of neurotransmitters. Those 4 are the primary, all right, outside of noradrenaline and adrenaline, or norepinephrine and adrenaline, which is adrenaline, so those primary neurotransmitters are the things that get you into state. You're never going to have 100% of one because you need a balance to a certain extent, but you don't want to bring all of the levels up at once because then it sounds flat, right? That's not a good mix. So if you have dopamine, which is drive, motivation, right, and reward, that's a very key concept, especially for most of us that are in this. And it's also, when I say reward, it's like that's the goal when you do something that's meaningful, right? I get my dopamine hit. I have a get together with Matt every Friday. We get together for an hour and we have a thing called Zamner hours. Zamner is it's the spray right there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I did a few blasts of this before we started.
Perfect.
And I don't want to interrupt.
No.
You actually managed to make this one taste really good.
Oh, thanks.
Kind of a problem because I keep it on my desk and I'll just be like, shh. I'm like, Luke, you just did 10 squirts 30 minutes ago. I think you're maybe overdoing it. It's that old addict behavior. But anyway, carry on.
It's great. Yeah. So you get the dopamine side of it, which is super important for your motivation and drive and reward. You have acetylcholine, right, which is thinking and processing and memory and those things. And then you'll have GABA, which is your chill, right, your chill mood. Like it takes the anxiety off, it takes the edge off, and it can actually be really effective in cognitive processing because when you have a lack of anxiety, you have an increase in cognitive performance because you're not multitasking. You're not trying to protect yourself from the bears and the lions. So. And then serotonin, which is more of a mood stabilizer. A lot of people think of serotonin as the happy drug, like selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, SSRIs, or antidepressants are one. But in reality, it's a mood stabilizer. And then you go to dopamine and some of the others to actually increase your mood. So those are primary. And then noradrenaline, right? Adrenaline, which is the fight or flight kind of thing.
Yeah, I know that one.
Yeah, right.
I hate that one because it activates when you don't want it to. I mean, you need it, right?
Right.
If we were just parasympathetic all the time, we'd step in front of a bus. So I appreciate the fight or flight response. But those of us that have had trauma and things like that, you can live in this state of hypervigilance where you can't turn it off, right? You have a situation in which you feel threatened, your nervous system goes, red alert, and then you're just stuck there, which is how I lived for a long time.
When I was in 1993, I was on my 4th company. And I was doing the 85, 90 plus hour weeks, 7-day weeks, no breaks, that kind of thing. And I was driven. I didn't think I minded doing it. But one day I'm in my office and I walk into my wife's office and I say, honey, I've been sitting in front of the monitor for 3 hours. I have no idea what I'm doing, who the client is, what the objective is, what the outcome is supposed to be. I think I'm losing my mind. I don't even know what day it is. She takes me by the hand. We walk around the neighborhood. She goes, again, you're really good at starting these things and you're really good at selling them. But that thing in the middle, you're not, that management thing is not your gig. And we were able to successfully sell that one and move on. But what I learned during that, and I got super depressed during that period as well. And I started getting chronic nose. I was dumping a pint of fluid a day out of my nose. I would be in business meetings with venture capitalists, having to leave, sniff, leave, right? Blow my nose, get all this fluid out of my system, go back to the meeting. I'm sure they thought I was doing coke. I'm absolutely sure. Because my energy level was always high. I could hold up a social veneer pretty well. But in reality, I was just fighting this thing. And at let's just say 7, 8, 9, 10 a.m., I would get a call from somebody that something was wrong, something wasn't going perfect or wasn't going ideal. I would big adrenaline rush. Serotonin would go in to try to rescue my heart from pumping out of my chest. I would use up all the serotonin here. The vagus nerve would say, okay, got no serotonin. It's over. I would go into a coma for hours. And then just before it was time to go to bed, I would finally feel normal again and try to do all my work in 90 minutes or whatever. And I'd go through these cycles. So you know that one. You know that adrenaline rush when shit's going down. And then you suddenly got to recover from that. And you don't feel normal right away. It takes a while to feel normal. Now in the states that you're in and the ability to recognize fight or flight and where it's coming from, you can manage that much more. But a lot of people don't. They're not self-aware. And that self-awareness is a big component of state change, right? Which is where the neurotropics come in for us. It's I want to achieve an optimum state. I might do it externally through a neurotropic or something, but I also, once I reach that state through the neurotropic, I can take a big breath, I can embrace it, and I can go, okay, that's what that feels like. That's where my brain needs to go. That's how my body feels, right? That's my energy level. There's my posture. How's my breathing? All of these factors you can take into account, and then you can go and create that state on demand later on. And you can also start working on neural pathway development there's a thing called neurogenesis that happens. One of the things we'll talk about is in College Genius is that BDNF, and then the neurogenesis that results. But all the nootropics do that as well, where they basically create blooms of new neurons, and you have the opportunity to program those so that your reaction to whatever's going on is different than maybe it was before. And over time, you create that pathway, and it becomes stronger than the reactionary trauma-based pathway that you had in the past. So
this is really good news. The neurogenesis is so critical. And it's funny to think that it wasn't that long ago that science, air quotes, believed that you just had the brain that you had,
right,
and that's it. It's over.
Somewhere between 12 and 26 years old, boom, done.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And it's been interesting for me to, I guess, through that self-awareness and just a lot of meditation over the years, where I've noticed historically that I've gotten the most triggered is in romantic relationships. It's just when there's intimacy and vulnerability is like where I would really get rocked. Even when I had some years of working on myself and things like that. And it's really interesting to observe most recently in the past, 2 or 3 years. I mean, it has a lot to do with the person you're in a relationship with. Mm-hmm. But I've noticed that if I do get dysregulated, that it's not that hard to get back into a good place. It's like...
Right. The recovery cycle is much shorter.
Yeah. And it's like, God, sometimes something will happen, just little petty things that happen in a relationship, right? And there'll be a moment where things get slightly tense, and then it just goes away, and then I'm totally fine very quickly, at least comparatively speaking. And then I'll think, if this was 5, 6, 10 years ago, this might have sent me into a tailspin, maybe for the rest of the day or even longer, right? That I just couldn't get out of. Back when those kind of worn record grooves were the ones that I was used to using my entire life, and always feeling kind of under threat, right? And out of control in a sense emotionally. And it's such a gift to be able to, A, evolve through some of those patterns, but B, have the awareness and kind of, I guess, the gratitude for it. Like, holy shit, all of this work over the years and, taking products like yours and all the practices and all the things, it's like, wow, it actually works. I can have a different response to stressors. I mean, just that alone is...
Oh, yeah.
Aside from, productivity and focus and creativity and all of those things, but just to keep cool, like in Pulp Fiction, be cool, honey bunny, just be cool, Luke. This is like, I used to just try and talk myself down off these ledges, and quite unsuccessfully, unfortunately, much of the time, I just get stuck in that. And it's such a horrible way to live.
I would, back in the really early 2000s, I would go download from Napster or whatever, old episodes of the TV show Kung Fu, David Carradine.
Yeah.
And I would literally watch a half-hour episode of Kung Fu to get me into state. Because watching Kwai Chang Caine navigate through the Old West and be a very calm, Zen state guy handling these people that, hated the Chinaman, is the way he put it. That was really good for me, and it centered me, and it got me into the point where, because I was dealing with a lot of stress back then, and so I had to model somebody in order to get that. And so he inadvertently became my, right? My
Your
mentor.
sensei.
Yeah.
That's funny. You know, that reminds me actually, sometimes I'll play this little game with myself when it's kind of, I would say largely around social media and just the chaos that has ensued in the last few years and the divisive nature of warring tribal ideals,
Yeah.
I guess you could say. But sometimes on social media, someone will pop off and say something really stupid in my feed, and I'll have the impetus at first to respond harshly out of, some kind of egoic response or, wanting to be right or any of that, right? But one of the things I like to do, to your point of the Kung Fu, is I'll ask myself, if you were an enlightened master, and I've read their books and
Right.
probably sat at the feet of a few of them over the years, what would you do? Would an enlightened master go, and get in the game, like jump in the
Play with the trolls?
Yeah, like it's like this net that they've thrown out, right, through their unconscious, unprocessed, unhealed trauma or whatever it is that's causing them to like want to instigate someone in that way. It's like, what if I just opted out and just sent them love and compassion? Or whatever I imagine an enlightened master would do. They certainly wouldn't go on Twitter and like try and win
combat.
Yeah. Probably not. What would Ram Dass do, or David Hawkins? Or any of the people? It's like they wouldn't even probably acknowledge the whole thing. They would just, maybe at best just go, "Oh man, this person's suffering," and I'm just gonna pray.
How do I give him a virtual hug? Right?
Yeah. So that's it's funny. My modeling works kind of the same way. I go, all right, you're not enlightened quite yet, Lou, because you're still very human in moments like this. But if you were, what would you do? And if I can do that, most of the time I'm able to, resist the temptation of ruining my own day in an effort to punish someone else for their, interpreted transgression.
Love it.
Okay, so let's talk about a couple other issues like
Sure.
ADD, ADHD, anxiety, depression. What's at kind of the root cause of some of these things in terms of neurochemistry?
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe we could explore some of the common solutions, SSRIs, benzodiazepines, sleep medication. When someone doesn't know about something like nootropics or mindfulness practices, they're likely going to be diagnosed through the medical establishment and then prescribed medication that may or may not work for some people, probably does. But I don't think that kind of methodology, that system, is going to actually change someone's performance, mind, behavior, response. So maybe you could delve into a bit of that. I know there's like 50 questions in that one diatribe.
No, I love that though. That's great. Plus, me being the poster child for ADHD, throw me 50 questions because I like to juggle.
That makes two of us. So hopefully the people listening will appreciate that. Follow along.
I actually built a poster years ago that says ADHD is my superpower, because it really is. It became that. And I actually had an investor at one time in 1999 who basically said, unless you get on Adderall or Ritalin, we are going to pull our deal away. Thinking that was a solution. We sold to Yahoo instead. The greatest FU is to do something bigger than, right? But so when you talk about one is let's talk about the price. Let's talk about writing the check for whatever it is you take. So we talked about we kind of barely glanced across modafinil as like a super, and a lot of people know about that. And I think Dave Asprey actually made it kind of popular as a neurohacking product. And it is a really interesting and can be super effective. But the next day or the next 3 days, you're going to pay the price because you don't recover. And there's also some sideline stuff that makes it, I don't think it's a good thing to use as a solution to these problems. It might be good just to have the experience once so you can go, oh, okay. And then to really, really kind of embrace what's going on and kind of like go, okay, that's the state. Now I need to go into that state. I need to go into Kwai Chang Cain's Kung Fu mode, right? To have that focus. But one of the sides of ADHD that a lot of people are not aware is the hyperfocus, almost OCD piece that can happen. I'm sure you've experienced it yourself. You can have the ADHD mode where you walk through a room and you totally forget what the heck you're doing. Like, what the hell was I here? And you just literally were out at the car, knowing you had to get something, and coming through the house, you had a thought, and then you've lost focus on whatever it was you're supposed to get. You've also had the time when you've sat down to write something or to compose something or to do something, and it's 6 hours later and you don't even know how you got there for 6 hours. You just are totally in that moment. You're very present. You're super focused, and nobody could derail you. So that's another side that people need to understand, that ADHD is not just spinning a million plates or getting lost in whatever details and losing your track. It's also, on the opposite side of it, is this super focused area. And you can accomplish that once you know how to get there. But on the neurotransmitter side, ADHD and dopamine are very closely related. When you don't have enough dopamine flowing, you lack the ability to have that state of recall of keeping that thing top of mind that you're trying to accomplish, and then organizing the details. So you need to have enough dopamine flow to make that happen. You need the acetylcholine flow at the same time to be able to tap into the memories, to tap into the learning that you've had, and to also do the lateral thinking, the creative thinking of that musical note reminds me of this song from Fleetwood Mac, reminds me of this lyric that Lindsey Buckingham wrote. Oh yeah, Lindsey Buckingham, finger style. That leads to the nylon in the string. I should use nylon for that. That makes sense? That associative thinking process? Mm-hmm. So one of the advantages of an ADHD mind with the right kinds of neurochemical input is that you can actually start doing associative thinking at a rate that most people would be way beyond their ability to comprehend. So we go to anxiety. There's a lack of GABA in your system often, and a lack of serotonin in your system. So, and that also leads to a lack of human connectivity, love. Like you don't have enough serotonin, you're not going to feel as connected to people. I came from a place where I've been dopamine driven most of my life. I think a lot of us that are on that edge are there. And so I would walk through the house and tell my wife, look, I need this, and this. I'll see you at 7 tonight for dinner. See ya. And then I'd walk out the door and go to my car and go drive to my office. And then I would be at my office and I would wonder why she was so cold to me. I go, oh shit, I just blew my wife out, right? And then about 4 days later, I'd go, I got to do something about it. I got to fix that. And then eventually I started being conscious of it. And so then it was 3 days later, and then it was 2 days later, and then it was the same day. And then it was an hour after I had offended her. And then eventually I played it in my head before I did it. And I said, oh, you need to have a better word choice. And you need to say, I love you. And by the way, you look beautiful. And those things. And same thing with Chastity, my girlfriend, is I have to remember those same things. And that's a serotonin thing, like getting serotonin levels up. The anxiety side, GABA. Like when you feel, that's why, Xanax is so popular, right? Because we're into this. So that's a GABA agonist that basically improves the levels of GABA in your system. And we even have a product, GABAlicious, that's all about that. And that is
which I love, by the way.
Awesome. I got a new version coming in you're going to really love.
The one, I'm going to hold that thought. We'll see if your nootropics work, if you can take us back, because I'll forget where you were. But dude, I took the GABAlicious the first few times, and I would take it kind of early evening thinking, I want to wind down for the night. And I found that I have a difficult time falling asleep on it. And then I looked at the ingredients and I was like, it has oxiracetam, or it has, I think, some racetam in it. Do you know why that would make me, like, it's good during the day anyway. I thought it was like a nighttime thing because, of course, I didn't read your copious instructions on how to do it. I was like, take it all and see what happens. But yeah, I find that it kind of keeps me awake, which is counterintuitive when you're dealing with a GABA product.
Well, the idea was to have a social drink.
Okay.
Right? And so, and it wasn't perfectly an alcohol alternative, but certainly something verging on that. Zamner juice is an extension of that. It's actually with kava. Take GABAlicious and take that together, then you're rocking.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
It's great. But I needed to have enough stimulant that the GABA wouldn't so tone down your system, right? Parasympathetic system, that you're suddenly going, I don't give a shit about anything, and I'm out.
Yeah, we go to a party and you just be taking a nap in the corner.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I do really like it. I just found like, I can actually take this during the day. And ironically enough, be pretty productive too. Like,
It's a great productivity product.
yeah,
What I like is that it gets me into when I need to do something fairly intense, but I don't want to be an asshole about it. Like I want to have focus or I want to have follow through and I want my neurons to be firing well, but I don't want to be like an Adderall. We call it, the Adderall asshole, right?
yeah.
Is where there's so much dopamine is flowing that you don't give a shit about people's feelings and you're just, you're yelling, you're dictating to people instead of collaborating with them.
This is something I've experienced with going, and I think I know where we were. We were on anxiety, by the way.
Were.
Nice. Yeah, I took a bunch of your shit this morning. But with modafinil, something I noticed, and I still take it sometimes, but here's the thing that trips me out about modafinil is some people will take the whole damn tablet, which I think is like 200 milligrams.
Right.
I don't think I've ever taken a whole one, maybe a half in like 2 quarters. So I'll take a quarter of it, but there were times when I was first experimenting with it and I would take a half and I was like, oh my God, I can sit at my computer for 5 hours and not look up or whatever, organize the closet, like things that like a tweaker would do, take a radio apart and put it back together for no reason. Actually, tweakers never put the shit back together.
No.
They just take everything apart. But anyway, what I noticed was I'm great, but if you interrupt me,
right.
Honey, are we going to the, it's just like very defensive. And if I'm interrupted in that state of high focus, it'll totally throw me off. And like you said, be the Adderall asshole.
Right.
Like it would make me a little irritable. So I do use that sparingly, mostly for like flying or if I'm really sleep deprived for some reason, a quarter modafinil. And I'm like, then I'm kind of normal feeling. I don't feel overstimulated. But anyway,
that's good because that's not going to have nearly the side effect they're going to have if you do 200 milligrams.
I don't even believe people can do that. But back to the point of how our neurochemistry is so individual. When I first got into modafinil, maybe, 8 years ago or so, like I said, I figured out my dose, which is just a quarter, barely noticeable, but enough to do something. And then I would give it to my friends. And some of them would take a whole one and they're like, dude, that thing you gave me, I felt nothing. Right. Like just zero. I'm like, what? I thought you were going to jump off a building if you took the whole thing, thinking you were Superman or something, right? So it's so interesting how we're so different in that way. But anyway, back to the anxiety piece and the relationship with GABA.
Well, so one of the things I want to really emphasize is downregulation versus upregulation of receptors and of neurochemicals. Is when you're on, whether it's Adderall or an SSRI or something like that, you're often really, really amping up the levels of those neurotransmitters and the neurochemicals. And what that does is there's a signaling mechanism in your body or your brain that tries to protect you. It's smart, right? It doesn't want to be overflooded with these things. That's why you have to trade. That's why you get pretty hardcore pharmaceutical when you start doing it in Molly and other things like that, right? And so in order to do that, it signals and says, I've got all, like when you start trapping, here's the trick. Let's say that you've got 2 neurotransmitters that are facing each other, okay? And they're transmitting some data path. And you've got dopamine flowing between it. But now you've got Adderall. Okay, so the Adderall is there's a calcium ion cloud that will surround the neuron gap that helps keep the neurochemicals from flying off into space, into the rest of the DHA that makes up the brain. Gray matter or white matter. And so these neuron pumps, which are like little volcanoes and receptors on each side, they're going to be pumping this neurochemical back, and then it's going to go and it's going to reuptake. It's going to go back to the original neurotransmitter and then back again. Well, as it does that circular event is going to signal to the brain, I got enough dopamine, right? Don't make any more. It's because it thinks it has a ton of dopamine available because it just keeps recirculating within that synapse. Eventually, that calcium ion cloud is going to fade, and the dopamine is going to flow in. It's going to be done. It's going to break apart. There's enzymes that break it apart eventually. And when that happens, you're going to have a depletion of dopamine. So you just took the Adderall or whatever happened to be that's methylphenidate or equivalent. You're going to now you're going to be depleted of dopamine. You're going to feel unmotivated. Your drive is going to go away, and your pleasure is going to go away that you would normally get from dopaminergic, from the reward system. It's going to go away until you may take more of the Adderall. So that's the thing. This downregulation is a real problem with a lot of the pharmaceuticals. Not because to make a patented pharmaceutical, you've got to target a specific illness or condition right? That's why we, in the nutritional space, we can't say that this cures anything. We have to actually say it doesn't cure anything, right?
I saw a funny company. Who was that the other day? It's Simply O3. They make ozonated oils.
Yeah, another one.
Yeah, they're great. And I'm a huge ozone fanatic. And in their marketing material, it's like, this does not heal eczema. This, it's like everything that it does, it says it doesn't do. And I was like, that's clever. That's a great way to get past the FDA thing, right? To just be
totally.
Like, whatever you do not use this product for A, B, and C. And anyone savvy
these specific conditions.
Yeah. And they like nailed everything that a topical ozone is great for,
Right.
Like acne, bug bites, whatever. Yeah, it's funny. I was like, that's good. I hope more people start doing that.
I love that.
It's a double-edged sword, because I see the kind of logic in a regulatory body that's helping to protect the public from snake oil or things with horrendous side effects or just things that are going to waste your money, like being ripped off. But it's just like, who's regulating the regulators? Then that's when you have this kind of chicken or the fox guarding the hen house, right?
Well, that's the thing is, if I was, let's just say that I started a pharma company today. I bought out Pharma Bro and decided to make his drug for, back to $17 a hit instead of $750 a hit. And I'm not sure if that was an obscure enough.
No, reference. I know what you're talking about. I watched the documentary on that guy the other night.
Yeah. You know what I'm talking about. When you have to, you put about $1 billion into today. Typically, you put $500 million to $1 billion into taking a drug to market, after human trials and everything else are included in, and all the development and those things. And you have a very specific condition that the drug has to be written for. And then you can go off brand or off label and go, okay, it could also be used for this or this or this. But they have to make it so the FDA says this. But here's the deal. Let's say that I've got a vaccine for a viral issue that's going around, and I need to accelerate that in the marketplace. The way you do that is you just pay more money to the FDA. It's called acceleration, right? So if you're a little nutritional supplement company making a really super effective product, and you want to turn it in, you want to make it so that it could be actually used in pharmacological applications in the medical industry, right? Great, no problem. You just pay us the $10 million a month that it takes, and we'll shorten it from an 18 to 36 month journey to a 6-month journey.
Pay to play.
Yeah,
interesting.
So that's the limiting factor, right? So you got to be in the 1% of.
Yeah. It's just funny, as someone like me that explores and thus promotes a number of different products, over the years, I've seen the brands get more savvy at not making medical claims.
Right.
But then it's like, you get kind of cornered. Well, how do you explain what it does? Like maybe you're not treating a disease or curing a disease, but there are quantifiable positive effects from XYZ product, and how do you say that without breaking the rules? It's funny. It's a funny little cat and mouse game there.
We play, I call it whack-a-mole. So as I formulate things, so I've got a lab in Burlington, Iowa, and as I'm formulating things, and Matt and I collaborate, and we have a team of 7 PhDs and 9 PhD candidates in Bosnia that work at a university, the Birch International University. And all they do 24/7 is work for Bioptimizers and Nootopia to extrapolate neurochemical processes and explore different extraction techniques and explore how these different molecules work together and do research and then give us quantifiable data outcomes and say, this is what we found. Everything we do is science-based, and we are now, literally, we run the wing. We run that wing. And now we're getting into the electronic side for devices as we're getting more and more. So,
cool.
Yeah, and we got a great AI guy on staff.
Wow, that's impressive. So it isn't just you in a bathtub, ordering shit off Alibaba. Hey, put it in a capsule, call it a product. That's funny, dude. Okay, so that's a pretty good kind of overview. Something that I don't know if you heard this, and I didn't read that deeply into it, but I just saw something within the past couple of days about a new study or some research that indicates that that depression and things that people are typically given SSRIs for is not
serotonin based. Yeah.
I was like, oh wow, it's about time, because I've seen so many people, and I would say myself, I don't want to claim something that's, an exaggeration, but I definitely had some mental problems. I don't know if I was clinically depressed or whatever, but I mean, I have known many people who have been friends that have verifiable mental illness and have been put on psych meds. I was on psych meds. I don't know whether I needed them or not, but maybe they saved my life for that period. Who knows? But this is always the thing you hear is like, oh, I have a serotonin problem, so therefore I need antidepressants. And now a pretty reputable study has emerged that says, oh, oops, that's not actually
we
true.
Spoke too soon.
Yeah. So did you catch the meat of that?
Yeah, and there's what they're saying is that essentially, and this is so great. This is a testament to the power of signaling molecules versus the neurotransmitter that we're thinking of, right? So serotonin has been known or has been established as a stabilizing mood molecule, but it's not the happy molecule that we think, maybe. But it does seem that when we increase serotonin levels on people that are serotonin deficient, like on the Nootopia website, if you click the first button right below the header, you'll take you to a selective neurotransmitter test. So we can kind of get an idea of where your neurotransmitters are so that when we can formulate based on those deficiencies or the excess that you've got. So, but what they're finding with the study is that there seems to be a secondary or tertiary signaling molecule or event that's occurring that is responsible for the antidepressive qualities of these SSRIs and things.
Oh, interesting.
Not serotonin directly. So what is the cascade? What's the secondary? And just like the amount of enzymes in the brain, right, that affect the breakdown or the enhancement and the stomach. There's a thing called the CP450 or cytokine P450 enzyme in the stomach. So if you take phenylalanine or phenylethylamine, both of those are naturally occurring amino acids in the body, right? If you take those and they go to the stomach, right, through the stomach acid, in 4 to 8 minutes, they're broken down and just, broken down into non-effective components and they become more amino acid pieces that might, help repair muscle or those things. But if you mute the CP450 enzyme, they will last for hours. So, and those are both pleasure molecules. Phenylalanine, serotonin and tyrosine and dopamine precursor, and phenylethylamine, which is, sounds like something out of Breaking Bad, right? But it's not, it's naturally occurring in the gut, and it is a pleasure molecule.
Huh.
So you start to feel anandamide, right? You start to feel those pleasure sensors coming alive. So, yeah.
Cool. That's very interesting.
So, yeah. So what we know, here's the deal. We know shit. We don't know shit about what we're doing. You have to be in the art of being willing to experiment and play and explore and combine real critical science with real critical experiential nature. Not like placebo, but saying, okay, can we get 90% or 95 or 97% predictable results from these things? And then the science backs it up. But often the science will say, this is what should happen, and you don't get the experiential result. Or we get this experiential result, SSRI, but the science is saying, oh, oops, we spoke too soon. Serotonin wasn't the key. It just happens to be a key, and it's acting on some other thing that's causing another enzyme to process another nutrient or amino acid or other component or neurochemical, or maybe the unknown neurochemical, right? So anyhow, it's really important to understand those differences. And then if we start to coalesce that body of data, thank God for NCBI and examine.com and some of these other resources, we can now take the disparate pieces, follow the rabbit trail, and suddenly start connecting the dots and go, oh, this seems to impinge upon this, which seems to signal this, that gives you this outcome. And that's when you can really start to play with these neurochemicals, the precursors, how the neurotransmitters work. And then you start exploring with, for us, we explore with, a lot of stuff in a Petri dish. We're just now building the world's best Buddhist-friendly mouse lab
Where you
Yeah, I'm serious. We are making the Buddhist-friendly mouse lab.
the do no harm.
Yeah,
mouse
do no
lab.
harm. Yeah.
You're going to have really focused and creative mice. That are,
Super mice are painting, and they're doing it. Yeah.
They're building these really intricate nests. They're building little pyramids in there and shit. by the
Right.
end of your
Yeah,
experiment.
they're beaming down and sitting in a lotus position.
I mentioned one of the racetams, paracetam, before.
Yep.
I think many people listening to this show will be like, Rasa, what? But I noticed, I mentioned your Gabalicious product, that you do use some racetams in the products.
We have used racetams. Our labeling doesn't catch up with our advancements. So we originally used oxyracetam. We've gone away from that now.
Oh, okay.
But I'm not saying it's bad. It just is not as friendly as some of the other. What we're finding is that there are extractions of a number of different compounds, a number of different like plant-based units, like Solastris paniculatus. We were the first people to say this could be Solastris paniculatus, or intellect tree seed, is a viney seed that grows in India, and I think there's some in Florida. And we take that and we extract. We both cold press the oil out, and then we do modified sonic extraction levels from there to be able to pull out. I think you're into tonality of how different frequencies affect the body, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I got a bunch of frequency devices around here.
You know what I'm talking about, yeah.
Yeah.
So same thing happens with molecules. So when you start subjecting, in fact, one of the extraction techniques we use here is to put a 40 to 44 kilohertz wave through the oil or through the alcohol and water extraction process here to get certain compounds to release from the mushrooms that otherwise would be locked in.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So there's even more goodies in like a lion's mane or chaga ratio or whatever?
Absolutely.
Oh, that's funny because I was just making these guys some coffee, and I've for years have been boiling chunks of chaga mushroom as my base water.
Nice.
But I always know when I'm done, and I'll extract, cut them up when they're all soft until the water stops turning brown. And then I throw them away or throw them in the garden or whatever. And I always know there's like still fat soluble,
Absolutely.
alcohol extractable nutrients there that I'm just wasting. Of course, take extracts that are done right. But that's interesting. I never knew that there was extraction beyond water or alcohol.
Yeah, in fact, it's kind of a quadruple extraction process that we do for that. So to make when we were building this product, and actually Chastity, my lab assistant, sweetheart, partner in crime, was the one. Matt had said that she was the one that kind of came up with this as a formula to a certain extent. But
he's talking about Collagenius.
Collagenius
for those
here.
Here, let me see one of those.
Yeah, man.
So for those, hopefully my editors get this. This is kind of a supercharged protein powder with all these medicinal mushrooms and stuff, which is very cool. I actually had probably too many scoops of it this morning.
Nice. Yeah, they're great.
I'm interviewing the guy, so I'm like, I'm going to try a megadose and see what happens. And I live to tell the tale. But I noticed that when I was looking at the extraction ratios on the mushrooms, I was like, what? How did you get that much out of it?
And that's the trick, right? So Matt had said that lion's mane. Matt had told me, Matt Gallant, CEO of Bioptimizers, said, hey, Mark, I got to tell you that lion's mane there's something special about lion's mane, and it had really made a difference for me when I was recovering from my addictions and my brain was fried. And so that was one of his first avenues to nootropic success, right? Was lion's mane. So he's doing megadoses. He was doing 6 to 10 or 11 grams a day, like a crazy amount, like to the point where you'd maybe get gastric upset. Hence masszymes and right P3OM and
you take
Capex.
Take enough enzymes with it, you're probably all right.
Right. So I was doing the same thing, and what I was doing was I knew that certain farms would have better mushroom quality, and also their kind of principles of how they run their business would be better. So we worked with almost 100, over 100 different sources altogether of mushrooms, and then we started working with the extraction levels. And 1-to-1 extraction level tastes like mushrooms. We're all familiar with that. But as you get to 20-to-1, there start to be these light notes of cocoa that come through. And then at 50-to-1, it starts to taste chocolatey. And at 100-to-1, you get somewhere between chocolatey and mocha and maybe a little bit of coffee type of thing. Depending on the farm, how it's raised, how clean everything is, including the water and the substrate and everything else, mycelium, right, for mushrooms. And whether it was fruiting bodies or mycelium and fruiting bodies or just mycelium. We found fruiting bodies for us, for our particular application, was the best because we got a lot more molecules. And then so you take that in a pan of warm water, 160-degree water, and you then dice them up, right? You macerate the mushrooms, and then you bring it up to temp. You bring it up nice and slowly up to temp, and again you start to see the color change in the water, right? Well, then you start hitting it with different frequencies, like from 20 kilohertz to 44 kilohertz, and you'll find at certain frequencies you'll see this just bloom of color come through.
Oh wow!
And you go, oh, that's a molecule. And you sample it, and you go, aha, that's this really interesting molecule that has this effect in research. And you go, aha, that's good. And then you send that through a microporous membrane that is the size of that, just slightly larger than that molecule, so that you can separate that out. And you have another microporous membrane past that that's slightly smaller for another molecule. And so you're now isolating these different molecules. So you do that, and then you take that same bath, you drain that, and then you throw 70% alcohol in there, right? You put a nitrogen cover on it so that it doesn't oxidate, because you don't want oxidation in your mushrooms. And then you do the same thing, and then you bring the frequencies up, and you find these new molecules that come out that are soluble in alcohol, right?
That's crazy. When you're applying the frequencies in this process, is this through magnetism, sound?
Sonic transducers, some piezo transducers, and some mechanical at the lower end of the range, and piezo at the higher end of the range.
Wow.
Yeah, and then a probe. You got a probe as well in the middle to make sure it's balanced.
So cool.
Oh, it's really cool. And so that is how you're able to both isolate the molecules and also then recombine them later at the ratios that are going to make the greatest impact. Like, we're really big on what's called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is kind of the precursor to neurogenesis, the creation of these new blooms of brain cells. So to optimize that, we have certain frequencies that pull out the specific precursors, right? In lion's mane and chaga and red reishi and cordyceps that pull out those components, and also the adaptogens, right? Especially in red reishi and you start selecting these molecules, optimizing them, and again, part of the fun byproduct of that was, as I'm putting things in capsules, Chastity's over documenting my work and pouring these mushroom substrates that we've picked up from all over the world, and pouring them into containers and marking them and putting in an MDS, like all the FDA required stuff on it, so that we know when we got it, where we got it, when it arrived, how long it's, what temperature we're going to store it at, all those things. She's doing that, and she's going, smells like chocolate, smells like chocolate, smells like chocolate, smells like cocoa, smells like mocha. And she's finding that stuff, and she starts combining them, and suddenly goes, this would be really good. She starts tricking me and making a mochas for me in the morning in my coffee. So she makes these mocha drinks, and not realizing it's mushrooms, but I feel the brain tingles, the neurogenesis happening. I'm going, wow, that's really powerful. What is that? She goes, it's a mushroom stuff. So we take it and we enhance it a bit, right, with some lecithin and some other things to make it so it really dissolves well. And we bring it to Matt at Dave Asprey's conference down in Florida last year as a gift.
That's where I first got the Nootopia box.
Is that the conference?
I ran into Matt. Yeah, he's like, I got something for you. It's like, it's nootropic. I thought he was going to give me one little bottle. He hands me this massive box. It's like out of a James Bond film, with like 9 formula in there. I'm like, okay.
Oh, dude, check it out. So this is what you're going to, that's for you.
Oh, thank you, sir.
That's in the coming weeks, that will be, or the coming month, about 2 months from now, that's how you're going to receive your capsules. On the end here, let me show you. So this is as we call it a mag pack. This we've lightened up the magnets. They're a little bit too strong on this prototype, but so.
Oh, cool. Hot damn.
So everything will be packaged like that, so that you can carry it with you, or you can even custom stack your own.
Because as of now, they come in a tube.
Correct. Yeah, everything comes in test tubes.
I'll show these guys watching. Okay. This is super cool, dude. Wow.
Yeah, so it's mag pack. So that's and that's kind of.
I'm like, what could I use this for afterwards?
Oh, right, totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, and we're going to send it. With each of the packs will be some generics that you can just fill. You can pull the caps and fill, and then you got to carry with you for the states you want to be in. Again, this goes all back to programmable state change.
Yeah.
Or you're on a trip and you just want to carry a couple of those, and you've got your mental reboot evening and a couple of mental reboot AM, then you've got an upbeat and you got a couple focus savagery for doing the various things that you need to accomplish. And so, so look for that in the next 2 months.
That's super badass. Okay, so we were on the extraction process.
So that's the extraction. So yeah, so this has come up. So we bring him to Matt, and Matt is a master of flavors and also a master of molecules. So Matt Gallant, it's one of his absolute superpowers, is he's done the stuff that I do. He's done it excessively, and he's done it in a fast-growing company, which means that you're subject to a lot of people that want to be your partner, your vendor partner, and those things. So he says, I know how to make this great. I know how to make this. This is really great, chocolatey, and it works. I can feel the neurogenesis right away. It's really comfortable. Let me help you make it great, and which he did. He always does. And so he started playing around with it and sending us stuff and going, I think this guy, this vendor, this component, Matt Titlow of Compound Solution became a partner in that and said, I think if we add this, this, and this, you'll get a smoother mouthfeel, right? Those the nuances that make it go from good to freaking awesome, rocking. And so it became that. And so it became and the other thing is Chastity is just turned 50. I'm 60, right? And so we're going, okay, collagen needs to be something for connective tissue, for our skin, for all those things. And also for the brain, it's incredibly valuable for the brain. So how do we, we're doing these two things, why separate them when they make a great companion pair? And there are nutrients inside of mushrooms that activate collagen, including copper and zinc, in a bioavailable form that's non-toxic, that basically make the collagen much more bioavailable.
Oh, interesting. I'm really big on copper. And I didn't know that mushrooms had copper.
Yes.
Do some of them have more than others? Like what?
Yeah. Like cordyceps are real big, and lion's mane has actually plenty. And the cool thing is, it's like a methylated form, so it's very bioavailable and non-toxic. And
it's not like just drinking water out of copper pipes.
Right. Great way to do it if you want to become a plumber when you're older. If this thing doesn't work out for you, great way to.
Yeah, trust me, I'm not doing anything related to building a home anytime soon. So you guys have created, well, I guess now even more, but at the time of getting this box, you guys have created 9 different formula. And for those on the video that shows my camera, this is what's in the box. I want to break down a few of these, and this is just a selfish part of the interview because I have you here and I don't have to read everything on the website. And it comes with the Brilliant Mind Blueprint book that I was looking at again, because I think this one's even updated from the last one I had, and I'm like, oh man, this is a lot of information here.
Yeah, and we're making one with bigger print for those of us that are aging. And
Thank you. I'm like, what's that say? But one thing that really struck me when I got the first box from Matt, he just gave it to me and I just kind of used it over the course of a few months. And then I did it like an official customer would. And I went and I took that survey you mentioned on the site. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. Kind of for those that have taken a Myers-Briggs or a DISC test or something like that, multiple answer, buzz through to the next screen kind of thing. And I was like, oh, so you guys are actually customizing based on personality traits, the way someone just inherently is, more sympathetic, parasympathetic, et cetera.
Right.
Maybe before we get into a couple of these, tell me how that survey came to be. What are you trying to determine in that survey? When someone gets a certain kind of profile or score on that, how different are the different formula that they're going to get in their box?
Radically. So that came from when I was doing the original, from 2008 to 2012. I had a little over 1,000 beta test customers. And I would go from 50, 250, maybe 500 at times. But often it was just subsets of people. I would send them these compound, molecule stuff in a test tube and say, try these things. And over time, I found out that about 30% of them to about 42% responded well to what I was giving them. Another set, somewhere between, another 30 to 40% felt neutral on it. And then 20 to 25% felt negative, right? It was not a positive in their experience until I started changing the ratios of the neurochemicals based on, I had them fill out a little form that said, how old are you? What sex are you? What's your biggest problem? What meds are you on? How healthy are you? When do you work out? What kind of foods do you take? How much coffee you drink or tea or whatever else? When do you go to sleep at night? When do you wake up in the morning? And then what are your goals? That's those sliders you see at the back of the test. Like, what are your goals? And after I got that data in, I could start to kind of extrapolate some stuff. I would throw all this data, I would extract the data from MySQL database, put it into a spreadsheet and go, that, and that seem to be common threads on people that are that weight, that are male, that are 45 to 60 years old, that are going through, the male equivalent of menopause, right? Andropause, and are having these issues and are maybe 20% overweight or 15% overweight and don't exercise often and drink 4 cups of coffee a day. Then I could kind of go boom and then nail it. And suddenly I was getting into the 90 percentile of performance with these people, like very high predictability. So now we fast forward now, we've had, over 100,000 of those people come through. So that data becomes very dense and rich and we can do a lot with it. And so when you fill out that form, the first thing is we do a neurochemical test, right? That's the first examination. And that's where you're talking about like DISC or equivalent. And then the second one is these, who are you? And then the third part of that, which is built into the second test, is what do you want? Who do you want to be? How, what's the performance parameters that mean things to you? Some people want to lean towards parasympathetic. They're too wired, they're too jittery, they're too on edge, and they need to chill a bit. And some people don't have the drive, desire, motivation, or other characteristics they need. And some people are already, they're self-aware enough. They go, I need this, this, and this, and I just want more of this. I know exactly where I'm going with this. And so we're able to take like these hardcore, high-performance biohackers and take it into the next level because we've got these obscure nutrients and extracts that we can work with. And then the ratios are like, some of the ratios can go up and down by 100% or more of this neurochemical precursor that we have in that component.
And then you can also, I haven't adjusted my orders. I just took the test and I just keep getting the same order. But one could customize, right? If they get the 9 different formula and they're like, I really like these 3, then
I do it almost daily.
Oh, okay.
What I mean by that is I give feedback. We have an app that comes with it. And so
I saw that. Yeah,
right.
That's a new development.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a 30-day journey where you can actually document. See, right. I need to do this because
I'm really can I say I'm disappointed, man?
No, it's kind of I don't want to say it's a problem, but I think because of the work I do, I'm just, kind of,
sure.
I spearhead research and then tell people about it. It's kind of one of the things I do on this show and with my various social media platforms. But also I think that old kind of addict mindset is pretty much alive and well. And so I get a box like this and, there's instructions, do this day, mix it with this, mix it with that. The way that I typically do things, and I'm not suggesting this as smart at all, but if it's like take 2, see what happens. I'm like, so what you're saying is take 5.
Right.
In other words, I'll take it to the threshold of too much and then scale it back.
Right.
Where I think the more prudent and probably really ultimately more effective way is to scale up, right? You take 1 at a time. Like what the app seems to dictate is okay, at day 1, you just take this.
Yep.
How do you feel? You journal.
You can journal it. Yeah.
You journal in the app. Day 2, try this. And then I noticed subsequently, as you get deeper into that 30-day journey, okay, you liked that, mix this with this, and then mix that with that, right?
Stacks and stacks.
Yeah, when I got this, I was like, well, if it's all good for you, I'm just going to take everything at once, which I literally was doing just willy-nilly. And I didn't have any negative outcomes, but then it was hard for me to tell which of the form. Is it the apex that I felt great with? Is it the mental reboot, upboot?
Right.
I couldn't tell which one was really grooving for me. And so I think now that I've had a few months of experience with this stuff and I've, like I said, haven't had any net negative effects.
Great.
But I need to just really go through and discipline myself to try one thing at a time. And so in the past couple of days in preparation for this interview, I have in fact done that. And I found a couple things, and then I want to go into some of these.
Yeah.
This morning, last night I made a big glass of the Nectar X, which is like a powder that comes in a tube like that, for those of you on the video. And then I put in about 1 liter of water, stirred it up. And then I sipped a little bit of it yesterday because I had a little afternoon slump and I had some shit to do. And then I remembered, I think from listening to one of your podcasts, or maybe Matt saying, oh, you make it and then just put it in the fridge. And then you kind of have on-demand little elixirs of sorts, right? So today, right when I woke up, I drank the rest of that you're supposed to sip it. I chugged it, but at least it was only one thing. And I was like, and no coffee or anything. And I was like, holy shit, within 30 minutes, I'm a very slow riser. I'm super out of it in the morning. I'm just a night person, unfortunately. So the rest of the world doesn't seem to be next incarnation, I'm going to incarnate on a planet where everyone sleeps until 11 and is up all night.
Perfect.
And then all business
I
transactions start around noon. You know?
Right, yeah.
But anyway, here I am. But yeah, I did that, and I just did that, and I was like, holy shit. Okay, I know what this feels like. And then I did the mental reboot, the AM capsule. I did that sublingually, just emptied it under my tongue, and I only did those two. And I was like, this would be a great feeling if I had kind of an easy day, like nothing too demanding. I didn't have to be focused. I just wanted to be like alert enough and have access to some creativity. So I kind of am getting the combination of those two. And then the other one that I isolated the other day was the power solution. And I was like, this one's like aggression on demand. And, you know, it's like high performance, get ready, take slow. So I made another one of those, and it was, I don't know how to compare it. It was the level of focus that I would get from something like modafinil. I sat at my computer, did a bunch of tedious, really, you know, tedious, repetitive tasks. Like not the lane that I naturally operate in, one that I really need some help to kind of wrestle my brain into like, all right, Luke, you're not getting up from this chair for 4 hours. You got to get this shit done. And I was like, God damn, the power solution is my secret sauce for that type of focus when I need it.
Awesome.
So I'm starting to get a sense for each one, but maybe we could do just kind of a brief overview on some of them.
Sure.
And I'd like to tease out some of these obscure ingredients. You've mentioned a number of them during the course of this conversation, but I'm just curious, like, what the hell is that thing? All right. So the Apex, this one here, is really, well, one thing that's interesting about these two that perhaps you could illuminate for us is that many of these are like filled with fat. For those watching the video, there's some kind of oil or fat in the capsule. And then others are actually a capsule inside of a capsule. So when we get to those, like that guy there, which is really, I mean, I've just never seen anything like that. But anyway, the Apex, calmness, creativity, neurogenesis. And this one says can be stacked with a buttered coffee, which, by the way, I did later in the morning after I got a sense of the Nectar X. I was like, got an interview. I'm going to push it a little bit. So I had a coffee with your...
oh, awesome.
Yeah, with your...
College Genius?
Yeah, with the College Genius stuff in there, which is, by the way, delicious. And then I did one of these. So it looks like I'm on like 4 of your products today, essentially, which is good for me. That's discipline.
That rocks, man, yeah.
But a couple of the things in here that are interesting is, I mean, there's things that you recognize like theanine, grapeseed extract, piperine, cayenne, curcumin, guarana. These are things I think people would be familiar with, but there's something called anhydrous in here that I found interesting, and then Omnipept O.
Omnipept O, yeah.
Yeah, what are these things about?
As we started doing extractions of different, grown herbs and things, we found that there was no definition for the way when you start bonding them to other components for what that is that they become.
Ah, I see.
Right. So, and we do all kinds of different bonding technologies and techniques to get, this component to actually mate to this component so that it will pass through the blood-brain barrier, and then we'll send an enzyme in to separate those so then they become the active neurochemicals.
Oh, wow.
So
you're merging molecules.
Yep, emerging and then finding a non-separation anxiety way to pull them apart.
That's funny. So let's say like I just had the Apex.
One of my favorites, by the way.
Obviously it says calmness, creativity, neurogenesis, but what's the net effect kind of these particular ingredients together?
I built that as an endurance product that is rather than have a very high level of energy, which for some people can translate to anxiety, it was bring the energy level up very smoothly. You almost don't notice it coming on. You just notice you don't have any fatigue. So you've got that kind of, one of the things you do with a microdose of modafinil is you don't necessarily feel wired. You just don't feel like you need to go to sleep right now.
Right? Yeah.
So that level of kind of calm but effective, like what I love about that is I can work until 11 or 12 at night, and I like to go, I'm forcing myself. I was the typical high-tech entrepreneur who went to bed at 2 or 3 in the morning, right? And I did that for many, many years, for decades. And then I realized because I'm working with programmers all over the world and those things. And like, it's not very noisy at that time of night. Nobody's bugging me.
Totally.
so I can get shit done.
I've always found late nights to be really productive, but then
Yeah.
the price the next day is the rest of the world's
Right.
up at 6. Like, let's go. And I'm like, no. Now, I'm going to digress for a second because that's just how I roll. But what I've noticed with morning people, and these are, I have this kind of borderline contempt for them out of just envy, pure envy, because I would love to be that way. And I think I'm just not. But morning people will tell me, oh, you can get that same time if you wake up at 4 a.m. and it's quiet. No one's interrupting you. Your email's not dinging. And I'm like, yeah, but it's 4 a.m. Like, you know what I mean? Like, who can do anything at 4 a.m.? So I think we are just fundamentally different in that way. But I agree, there is like when everyone kind of goes to bed and everything shuts down, after 10 p.m., I'm like, okay, now I can actually do my deep creative work. But
I almost think
this comes with a cost because of the next day, the deficit of sleep and all that.
I can't tell if it's spiritual or if it's we were talking about EMF and the rest. But it seems that as the world quiets down, my head goes with it. It quiets down as well, and that it's the more creative, the more genuinely creative art starts to emerge. And it doesn't feel like it's being tossed around or like it's being sucked up somewhere and then I've got to go find it again. It feels like it's very present. It's very much in front of me and I can actually accomplish something. And for me, like for you, the art that we do, whether it's communication or, I love building cool stuff, that emerges most when I'm in a state of flow. Stephen Kotler would love that.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. He's been on the show, yeah.
And to be able to not have to work to dive into that state of flow. It's almost like Steve Pressfield, right?
Yeah.
It's like you just do the work and flow
of
shows, right?
Dude, I interviewed Stephen Pressfield. The War of Art is this most famous book. And anytime I want to do something and I just am avoiding it.
Right, yeah.
It's like, well,
resistance.
I should probably go, leaf blow the garage. I'm supposed to be writing a book. You know what I mean? I'm like, Stephen Pressfield's voice is in my ear going, it's the resistance, Luke. You got to beat the resistance. So after getting to know his model, now I see resistance everywhere. And it's it's just, my life is rife with resistance to doing the big, scary, hard thing, if you have the right help in your brain, you're saying you can actually kind of hack that resistance and
absolutely
slip through the gate of that thing that's making you avoid the hard thing.
Well, and I used to take that book. This is like Santa Monica 101, right? I would take that book, the little hardcover version of that book, and I would take people to lunch and I would literally read them the book. And it was so great because one, it's a well-written book, obviously, but the other is having a name for the thing, and him as a former Marine, right? Having a name for the thing, for the enemy or whatever, in this case, the resistance, was so powerful. Because before it was I'm being distracted or there's that thing over there. But being able to name it and then make it big enough that I can go, fuck you, resistance.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Very empowering.
Yeah, I agree. Because without that identification of that phenomenon, it's like one is easily led into feeling like a loser.
Right.
Because you're like, at the end of the day, you're like, that was the big thing on my to-do list today. But instead, I did all of this busy work to avoid the big thing. God, I suck.
Right. The self-esteem hit from ADHD. Yeah.
Versus reframing it and like, okay, the resistance was strong today. And, at least I know what it was. Maybe tomorrow I might have, a better shot at getting after it. All right. I want to get into a couple more of these here. So focused savagery.
Yeah.
Now this one I have not done. I've taken it in conjunction with a bunch of other things, but I have yet to do like an isolated test where I just wake up, drink a glass of water, have this and see what happens. But this one's, could be kind of scary from the name. And it's like intense drive, hyper productivity. And then it says provides aggression. And when I read that, I was like, I don't know if I need that. But, but there is something to aggression in that might be the very thing we're looking for to break through that resistance, right? Sometimes it's like, you know what? I'm sitting down right now. I'm going to do this shit, whether my mind and body want me to or not. So what's more info on this one?
So I developed that as an alternative for people that were having a hard time focusing, who may have been former or were existing Adderall users or equivalent.
Okay.
And one of the things that I'm a really big advocate of is working with You're a medical professional. I'm not a medical doctor, nor am I. I do play one on the internet.
Yeah.
So is helping the people to be able to titrate down off of the instruments, the current, pharmaceutical instruments they're on, to help recover their brains, because we talked about that downregulation of receptors and downregulations of neurochemicals from having something that traps the neurochemical between the synapses and signals, I got enough, right?
Yeah,
which basically tells the body to quit producing it, and now you're screwed because you don't have enough. And it can't recover fast enough. And if you do it long enough, it can't recover. It doesn't recover. So now you're kind of addicted to it, and now you need it to operate. So the idea behind that in my original was one for me, right? I didn't want to be on Adderall. And I was only on it once or twice a month anyhow, but it made me such an asshole when I was on it. I didn't want that effect. The other is I found enough of our clients, so many of our clients were using that as their performance drug. And I wanted to find a solution to that, or modafinil or others, that would give them the dopaminergic activity that they needed to follow through on things, to stay focused, and to have drive or motivation so they could face down the resistance, and to do it in a way that would be non-destructive to the neurotransmitters and the neurochemistry of the brain. And also, they could start working on chipping their meds with their doctor's help, chipping their meds. So maybe they could work with a quarter of the amount of their med and use this as a way to kind of fill in the blanks on the rest of it. And eventually maybe even be able to eliminate the med altogether, so that they're kind of restoring their brain and taking advantage of neurogenesis and some of those things that you can get from those products.
Awesome. All right. So focus savagery. And then this one is another one of those that comes with this capsule. I don't know. I just like these. It just looks like some otherworldly stuff here. But this one comes with these capsules that it's like in multi-layers,
Yeah.
right? You have like a fat layer, then a number of different colors in them.
That wasn't done for cosmetics, just so you know.
I mean, it looks cool. It's a good marketing trick. But I would assume that some of the nutrients that you're using in these capsules are fat soluble, and so it's like a carrier fat. Are there other benefits to any of the fats in here
it's
too?
It's a carrier fat. It is a very potent omega-3 carrier fat. It also reduces inflammation.
Okay.
It helps to pull. So the reason it's in two pieces like that is the oil will separate and dissolve in the stomach, right, at that pH, at the 2.5 to 4.2 pH. It'll dissolve. It'll get through the stomach lining and into the bloodstream. And then the other components will dissolve later on, like pasidoadenum typically. And so you're at more like the 6 to 7.2 pH. And then go and it'll meet up with the oil. The oil will carry it through the blood-brain barrier, and then it can go do its magic. So
that's freaking cool.
The other is that vitamin D we have a deficit of vitamin D because we work indoors. And so there's 2,000 to 5,000 IU of vitamin D, and typically about 100 micrograms of vitamin MK2, MK7, right? So we're basically cleaning out the excess calcium from the bloodstream, putting it on the bone to increase bone density. And
I'm a big fan of K2.
Huge. So
yeah,
yeah,
especially with all the EMF. You got
big time.
Cells being flooded with calcium. It's crazy to me. People still take like calcium supplements.
I know, right? Yeah.
Just go sit by your Wi-Fi router, and your cells will have more calcium than they could ever hope for. All right, another one, and this one I have done a little bit of isolated testing with, because there's just days where I already feel stimulated. So I've done this one upbeat. Mm-hmm. And this one, confidence, ambition, positivity. Yeah. This one I've noticed to be, and by the way, one thing that I think is cool, it tells you which ones to stack them with.
Yeah.
So I have tried to pay attention to that, cool. At least like, all right, if I'm like, I want a little more, I'm doing an experiment, I will do that. But this one I've noticed to be, true to its name, a pretty good social nootropic.
That's it exactly. Okay. So before I got here, I grabbed an upbeat and a brain flow. They're complementary. They work really well together. And then a couple shots of Xaminer juice. So that's my social. One is it reduces social anxiety, and it increases my, whether it's word choice or whether it's the fluidity of a conversation, and allows me to get into flow, and also increases kind of my love. Like, I don't know, chakra is the term, but essentially my connectivity with you is higher. Right. And I think that that's a really worthwhile thing to explore, especially when you're in a environment like this where we want to see, like, what are the deep, what are the rabbit holes we want to pursue? What are the things we want to stay surface on? And then how do we want to explore the different sciences within this? So
cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Then I mentioned power solution. This one, aggression on demand. and this one, I think, just looking at the ingredient deck, has a larger number of ingredients than some of the other ones. And this is one of the powders for those listening. So you're going to open this little or large capsule into water and kind of, sip it over a period of time. But as I said, this was the one where I was like, holy shit, like I am crushing it. So this is kind of like my reserve when I know I have something that's demanding to do in terms of focus. What's the formulation behind this one?
So the trick on that one was to take the things that we had learned from building NectarX, which was the first product I ever developed, was now called NectarX. It used to be called NZT, right, from the movie Limitless. And with NectarX, I said, you know what? I bet if I could put people into an artificial level of ketosis, I could then optimize the shit out of that and get that to be kind of one of the core signaling elements to increase the focus. And that's what I did with that. So I developed for gamers originally.
Okay, that makes sense.
Right?
That makes sense, yeah. Because I'm not a gamer, but that's the kind of focus.
Your kill to death ratio rocks with that.
Yeah, but that's, like, if I was going to play a video game, it would be like the one where you go plant flowers or something, like, I don't think I'd be wanting to shoot people.
Oh, shit, I could just see that now.
I try to eliminate those thoughts from my mind as much as possible. And they sneak in every once in a while. But yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense because it's like the focus you're looking for sometimes is the focus that still allows you to have a lot of moving parts going at once, right? So thinking of gaming, like there's a type of focus, the modafinil focus, let's call it, where like I'm going to focus on one thing and no one better interrupt me or you're going to get some heat and I will crush that one thing, but I can't like multitask or bring in different threads of information or focus. In other words, like it's single focus. So what you're going for here is the ability, to have focus, but also to have kind of multi-awareness.
Big time.
And have maybe like a bit less task switching fatigue.
You can be on this headset. You can be playing, your buddies or whatever. I don't game either, but Matt does.
Right.
And so, so Call of Duty, is happening. And literally that's what he'll do. He'll text me and go, dude, my kill to death ratio rocks.
Oh,
thanks for the power.
I mean, listen, something to be said for that is I think we all do have, well, maybe not all of us, but many of us do have that innate warrior and killer. And as far as an outlet for that, it's better than, getting out of your car and hitting someone in traffic. You know what I mean? It's like, if you're going to get
Michael
it out,
Douglas and falling down, right?
Totally. Yeah. That's one of my favorite films, in fact.
Well, that's how Xamner came about.
How? What's the relation?
So there was a lady in Portland, Oregon, who owned a bunch of medical, clinical care facilities in the Portland, Vancouver have two routes, I-5, Interstate 5, and I-205. If you've been in LA, you know what I-5 looks like, or San Diego or any of those
I've been
areas.
stuck on it many times.
Exactly, yeah. It's like the 405 during peak hour. So in Portland, it's the same thing. She was getting to the point where she said, I'm going to get out of my car one day and beat up a trucker if you don't find me a solution. And so that's what I developed that for. Something she could take 3 or 4 or 5 or 8 squirts and immediately tone down, GABA receptor up, a little bit of serotonin to make her feel happy at the same time, and do that. So that's how that came about, and it totally changed her life. She was,
That's cool. That must be why I like sitting it on my desk, as the variety of emails roll through.
Right, exactly.
Some of them are good news, some of them not, depending on how you look at it. So yeah, that one's useful. Where does the name Xamner come from with this stuff?
Matt and Wade at one time were not just your clean cut boys, making really cool nutritional supplements. They were a bodybuilder, right? One of the top world ranked national bodybuilders, a vegetarian bodybuilder, all natural, no roids or anything, and a trainer who happened to be an absolutely incredible marketer and communicator, who also trained women on self-defense for 7 years, doing Krav Maga and some of those things. And they traveled down to Panama, and when they got into the party zone, like you may have been in the party zone once when you were an addict, or
I've been in a couple party zones.
The party zone, yeah.
Yep.
So when they were in the super party zone, right, at a rave or whatever, that was Xamner. Dude, we are totally Zamner.
That's funny.
Yeah, so that's for Zamner. That's
of course.
Matt, I apologize if I spilled the beans, brother, but
oh, Matt's pretty open and forthcoming about his past and whatnot. All right, the last one is brain flow. And then on this one, it says stacks well with everything.
It does.
So is this one just kind of like a, brain health?
It's an overall potentiator for everything because of the concentration of the Solastris paniculatus and some of the other components in it. When it gets in the blood-brain barrier, through the blood-brain barrier and gets into the brain and distributes, it increases the oxygen flow into the brain as well as the potential for acetylcholine. It doesn't force acetylcholine into the synapse. It just has a lot of precursors available so that whatever you want to do with it, you can do with it. And that can be as simple as going, I want to focus, and then you'll be able to focus better. Or it says, I want to have a focus savagery, and I want to go be like a rock star. Or I want to take Zamner, and I want to be more chill or better chill or more functional while I'm chill. Those kinds of things. So it brings your baseline up.
Okay.
The other component that's similar to that is mental reboot AM, which is a sublingual.
The one I did this morning, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I consider that kind of the let's clear your canvas and let's bring a palette of colors available to you, and then you can pick the colors of choice for the day. So, and those colors might be, again, any of the different neurotropics that you do, or your practice meditation, or going out and doing whatever your sport is. Or
with the mental reboot, there's an AM and a PM.
Yeah.
Can you do the PM one before bed, like that late PM?
That's what you want to do.
Okay,
yeah. So, and I made that because at night, you probably know this part in the sleep cycle, right? Is your brain starts to shrink slightly. And what happens is around the capillaries, you open up a space around the capillaries for cerebral spinal fluid to flow. When it does that, the very thin capillary layer, it's able to, nice, yeah. Did you hit it? Did you?
Yeah, that was good. Carry on. I always feel bad because I'll do that. This stuff's called Zen spray. My friend Dr. John Laurent's created it. It's like a Amazonian tobacco blend with essential oils and oxytocin.
Oh, nice.
So it's like a really good nootropic. It just feels awesome. But I won't warn guests that I'm going to do that. And I'm waiting for them. What the hell is he doing? His eyes are watering. He's over here sneezing, freaking out. Anyway, carry on.
Better than a vape, bro.
Yeah, totally. I should have warned you early on. Hey, if I do this weird thing, just pretend like it's not happening.
Cool. It's not on camera. So the idea of where that was so I'm from Washington State. Okay. And that's where I started the company. And when I did that, about, I think it was 2013 or 2014, weed became illegal. And so now people were doing weed openly. And my clients were all over the United States. And so they were finding ways to get weed if if it wasn't legal.
Yeah.
And so.
Never stopped me.
Yeah. When I was young, when I started smoking weed when I was in 5th grade, and I quit in 7th grade. So, and I became a runner, like an aggressive, hardcore runner. I ran a 436 mile. So I was really, competitive. My big brother, my hero, Doug, was the one that convinced me to do. He said, hey, bro, I want you to quit smoking weed. It's not good for you. I'm going to quit. I'm going to take up running. He lied, but he saved my life, right? So you got to love that guy. And what I noticed was that 6 months after running every day in school, ran a thing called the jaunt around the fence around the school, right? And then I ran a 2.5 mile loop, really aggressively, sprinting a 2.5 mile group every day. And 6 months into it, I woke up on a Saturday morning and my head was finally clear, meaning that I could tell the difference in cognitive performance between my weed smoking days and my non-smoking days. But it took 6 months at 13 years old to get that clarity to come back. So I have these clients that are high-end executives at the biggest corporations in America and worldwide who rely on their performance and their cognitive performance to be effective at what they do. And they rely on our stuff to give them that edge. So they were starting to go, to wind down at night, instead of having a cocktail, I'm going to go have a bong hit. And we were starting to see a performance decrease. And so I said, okay, I could fix this. How does the brain work to detox at night? And I found that, right, that literature, and there was an NCBI on that cerebral spinal fluid, right, evacuates, pulls out the toxins and the mitochondrial, refuse at the end of the day, pulls it out into your spine and then out of your body. That's what happens at night when you sleep. So how could I accelerate that process and accelerate that so that it pulled out everything so that you're not dealing with a toxic environment or a competing environment. Just like the caps. When you say, why the layers? Well, we've got anti-inflammatory and adaptogen in one layer. We've got really, really intense B vitamins in another layer, and some non-stimulant stimulants where they basically, the gut can detect that there's like cayenne. And so it can say, okay, we're going to do a very slow release of adrenaline, right? Or noradrenaline. And we're going to do that just to kind of wake up the body a little bit. So we do that. Then we do antioxidants, hardcore antioxidants. Because a lot of us are dealing with oxidative stress, and we're dealing with adaptogenic response stress, cortisol overload, and inflammation. So if we can remove those, increase our B vitamin levels, which act as enzymes in the body. A lot of people don't know that, but the B vitamins are effective enzymes. And then we can go, okay, now we've got something we can work with. Now we've gotten rid of a lot of the things that keep people from performing. Those alone is a great product. That would be a world-class product, right? Let's get it.
And I'm assuming not only for, eliminating the negative effects of that evening bong hit, but probably, and I don't drink, but probably a good hangover prevention tool, I'm assuming too.
Yeah. I even made, one of the products that we made, I was pretty proud of, is I made a whole system for getting Lil Jon, for helping him recover from the amount of liquor he drinks every night when he's on stage. So
you guys are going to infiltrate the rap scene with nootropics. Hey, it's good. Maybe they'll settle down
so the cool thing with that is when you remove those toxins, your wakefulness, like you said, you wake up slow. Take that tonight and maybe even do a couple of hits of that, like 4 hits of our sleep spray, that emerging sleep spray we're doing. And when you wake up in the morning, you'll find yourself much crisper than you'll normally be.
Nice, I need that.
And it's great. And it allows you, I'm the same way. My girlfriend likes to, she's like business. She's got a laptop in her lap, like before I even, pull a pillow off my head. And so she's that early morning and then dies at 10 o'clock at night. She's...
It's funny. Same with my wife, Allison. She wakes up, she's whistling, just hopping around. I'm like, how are you this awake? And then, 9 p.m. If I don't catch her before 9, she's going to start fading. Like if I want any quality time, you're going before 9. By 10, she's out. It's just so interesting how we're wired so differently. One thing I wanted to touch on before we wrap up here is the phenomenon of microdosing. So many people now are starting to take very small amounts of, psilocybin mushrooms or LSD and using those as performance enhancers, which I do. I kind of forget about it, but when I remember, I'll do that. On certain days, I find a microdose of LSD to be really, really helpful it's like a merging of focused and creativity. Yeah. Which is just awesome. But I'm curious, and I think with psilocybin, for me, it's not so much like a productivity or focus or work thing like the effects of LSD, but it's more on the creativity side, and also just mood enhancing, just kind of
very positive,
right?
Yeah, because the serotonin, the way it works with serotonin and the rest.
I don't even know. I'm just mushrooms are great. I should probably take a tiny bit a couple days a week. But I'm wondering if any of your formula, I don't know whether or not you can even say this because these substances are illegal in the state in which we are recording right now. But are there any that would be complementary, or just what's your take on that in general?
I actually helped to pass the laws in Portland, in Oregon, on making psilocybin or psychedelics legal in clinical use.
Oh, cool.
So yeah. So
you should make a hat. Make mushrooms great again. Or make mushrooms legal again, right?
There you go. Yeah.
They were. So yeah.
Dude, that would be so good. I got to do that. It'll be red. It'll have.
And you make it out of a mushroom like Paul Stamets.
Right. Yeah. I got a great picture of Paul and I together doing that. It's funny. It was funny because I was handing him a test tube of Upbeat, and he just and he had his assistant. He goes, grab that, and she grabs it, and he goes, dude, you have no idea how often the DEA is like looking at me. They're going, dude, this is not drugs. It's not, these are neurotropics. It's good. So it's great. It was a funny conversation afterward. But so this is on the record, off the record, right? Is I have had, when I was 16, I did a macrodose, and then I became a state tennis champion. Okay. And it got me into a state that was completely different. Have you ever played tennis, or do you know the game at all?
I've played once.
Okay.
Yeah, literally, I played tennis
Is that
once.
right? Oh, that's great.
Yeah, with my dad and family. Yeah,
I love it. Well,
and shockingly, I've never been good at any sports or been interested in them, but I was actually really good at it.
naturally?
Yeah, yeah. And my dad was like, "You played this before?" I'm like, "No." He goes, "You're really good." I was like, "Okay, cool." Hand-eye coordination. I don't know. I've never been athletic, but I actually, despite my disinterest in sports as a whole, I actually had fun, and it's surprising.
Awesome.
I guess I just don't have a tennis court around. Otherwise, I'd probably do it. It was fun. So anyway,
no. So what it did for me was it shifted my perspective. I was a gear hound. I had like 8 rackets or 6 rackets, each tuned to what ball. What was it a Penn or was it a Wilson or was it right? And then what surface I was on, how long the balls had been in play, whether I was serving or receiving serve, like that critical.
damn.
I memorized every movement of the top players in the world, and I stood between 2 sliding glass doors, pulled the drapes at my parents' home, and I just went through looking at stop motion, of that particular stroke, and I grooved it in until I knew it. So I was emulating my heroes in the game, Elina Stasi and Bjorn Borg and Guillermo Vilas and those people. And so I really geared it in. We were losing. I'd already won singles. We were in doubles. The mushrooms kicked in. In my head, a song kicked in. The song was a 7/8 time signature, which is a weird time signature. For some reason, this is like Mushrooms 101, right? I knew the guys on the other side of the net. This is 1977 or 78. Guys on the other side of the net had a 2/4, 3/4, or 4/4 song going in their head. Because I thought people had song going in their head because I was on mushrooms. And I'm in the middle of a competitive tennis match. And because they were going to have, they're going to have, disco, country, or rock, right? It was kind of like how I broke it down in my head. And I had this weird time signature. I hit the ball behind my back. It was a winner. And that led to going, and we won the point. We were down, and if they would have won that point, we would have lost the set and the match, and it would have been over. And then we killed them, and we just, were indomitable. I got into the fact that I was dancing. I was no longer working. I was playing. What I think that microdosing and even macrodosing on occasion can do is get you out of your critical thinking mind, right, out of this part right here, and start getting into that creative and play level where, and this goes back into Tai Chi, or it gets into watching an episode of Kung Fu, or Stephen Kotler talking about flow. It gets rid of the barrier between your critical thinking mind and the systematic steps that we do to perform any given thing, and says, let's just go play with this. And I think that's a really valuable place to be. I can't wait. I mean, someday it'll be legal and we'll be able to use it. Until that point, I've got to work with what I've got. We are creating a product called, that'll be released, I think, in 2 months, called Dopa Drops and Euphoria. It's a pairing of 2 capsules. One is a 3-stage dopamine enhancer that basically increases the available levels of dopamine, but it doesn't push dopamine at you. It just gives you a lot of available dopamine.
Oh, cool.
And it does it over time.
Kind of like a safer and more legal version of the LSD microdose.
Right. And then there's a second capsule. And the second capsule has a monoamine oxidase inhibitor that basically blunts or it absorbs the enzyme in your gut that would get rid of this phenylethylamine that is the pleasure neurochemical in your body, and serotonin and some of the other factors. It blocks the breakdown of that, so it lasts for a lot longer, for about 4.5 hours. And then it releases, so it blocks that first, and then it releases phenylethylamine in the lower part of the gut, so it can be kind of a slow extraction. So then it gives you this really lovely rise in euphoria. And so now you have dopamine and euphoria combined together, and you just feel like let's go do some cool shit, man.
Wow.
Right? Like for me, getting up on a whiteboard at that point is a real blast because everything is firing so fast, and I can just pick them out of the air and go arrange them, or going and doing, like, I'll do an aggressive bike ride or something and just have a blast, and I'll crank Pearl Jam and I'm done, it's just rocking it. Those kinds of things. And I think that that's a state that I think people need to experience more often, because we get so serious about what's going on, or we're impinged upon by the seriousness of situations, when in reality, this is all a game, man. And we really need to realize that it's not a win or lose proposition. It's this, it's a fluid state, and there's a big, huge continuum of what winning and losing is, and we just need to start enjoying the whole process instead of putting a value.
That I think is probably, and I've had a lot of benefits from the intentional use of plant medicines and psychedelics, but I would say maybe the main overarching benefit has just been taking it all a little less seriously, right? Because you go in, in a macro dose kind of situation, you realize that all this is made up, right? It's just like, it's because you go to a place where you're not encumbered by your perception of reality being based on your senses, right? Because these other senses open up. And when those other senses open up, you realize that there's much more to you than just your thoughts, feelings, emotions, sensations, your body, your being here, your physical locality. You're somewhere else, yet you're still here, right? And then you emerge from that, and you kind of have to put the pieces of your intellect and persona back together and pretend like you're a person, is what it feels like to me. But in that pretending like you're a person again, because, we're here functioning on Earth, and there's a purpose to our lives, and we've been born into a body, I think, for a reason. And so you get back to, being a person again. But there's still that memory, at least this is how it is for me. There's still that memory and visceral experience of knowing, not just an idea, but knowing that there's more to it than this. And in that, the seriousness of it just gets less heavy. I notice that sometimes, even just I used to have this sense of guilt, for example, if I didn't, this is a very inconsequential example of this, but if I didn't get back to people's emails very quickly, it would stress me out. I'd be like, I got 50 emails that are unread, and and now I'm just like, what's going to happen? It's like, so they don't like me, or the deal is slower, it doesn't happen. And it's just like, whatever, I'll get to it when I get to it, and this is one example of just wearing the world like a looser garment in general, right?
I love that. That's a great. I've got inbox 270,000 right now.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine.
Inbox 0 is a far cry, but I love that. I think that the great spiritual leaders and some of the gurus of our age have, they work so hard to to help us untether ourselves from the things that bind us. And from our structured belief system that we use to try to operate within this world. And I think that's one of the magics of that. When I was 9.5 years old, my parents divorced. It was devastating, devastating. And they never fought or anything. They divorced. My oldest sister had left home, and they didn't know how to deal with it. And so the same one that was shooting up, right? So they and my parents were incredible people. My sister closest to me in age said, I've got an extra ticket. My boyfriend and I are going to the Chicago concert, the band Chicago, right? Great band. And she goes, I got an extra ticket. She goes, and I was really depressed. And I was trying to journal. We didn't call it journaling. I didn't know what we called it back then. But it was recommended that I get my feelings out on paper. And they just were gobbledygook, and they didn't make any sense. And I couldn't connect with them. And they ended up being Seussian rhymes. So you know what I mean? Like Dr. Seuss, like shit rhymes, right?
Yeah.
So I'm third row back, and there's a song called Questions 67 and 68. It's a great old song. And then followed by one called Dialogue. And in those songs, they have the vocals go back and forth between these two elements. One is an optimist and one's a pessimist. And they're kind of volleying this commentary back and forth. Well, what about this shitty thing? Well, yeah, but what about this awesome thing? And back and forth, right? And I'm sitting there as this kid, and I go, holy crap, I don't have to write this stuff. I got to go find it. Somebody's had the emotional experience already, and I just need to go become really good at finding it. So I got home, and I went through all my old Elton John albums and all the Pink Floyd albums and all the Beatles albums and all the Zeppelin albums. And I'm just going, oh my God, this is awesome. All these guys have been through these emotions. I don't have to find, they're right there, right? Like when I think of Counting Crows and August and Everything After. There's Around Here is a great tune. And the first paragraph in that song, if you ever read that, it'll like blow your fucking mind. It is so rich in visual imagery and in heart. and you go, oh my God, that's great. Or In Your Eyes, Peter Gabriel, or Salisbury Hill on transition. If you're going through transition, Salisbury Hill is an incredible song to dictate transition. I think these are the tools that we've been given to be able to explore. And you take something like a microdose, or you take something like a nootropic, or you take something like, it could be anything, to help enhance that connection with these emotional things and also provide direction. I think that if we could get, these kids that are going off the rails because of whatever was meds or the fear or bad psychiatry or whatever, and and they start shooting up a mall or a grade school, and we could show them there, man, dude, somebody's been where you're at. They relate. There are these incredible tools. I know that went off the rails with this, but I think that you clearly have an appreciation for music, former bass player.
Yeah.
Right?
Music saved my life, man.
Dude, that's it.
Yeah.
Right?
I don't think I could have, well, two things saved my childhood. One was copious amounts of marijuana, and the other, even prior to that, was music. I mean, really, that was exactly what you're saying. And even more so maybe than the lyrics at that time was just the energetics of it, right? There was a spirit flowing through the first Jimi Hendrix. I think Jimi Hendrix for me was the first one where I was like, what?
Yeah.
Oh my God. I'll never forget how exhilarating, Foxy Lady, like what is happening
That's exactly what was playing, man.
Yeah, like whatever this is, this is it, and then set out to do that for a long time. But yeah, it's the language of the heart, right?
It is.
It's, I mean, I listen to sometimes, Brazilian music. I have no idea what they're saying in Portuguese, but it's the vibe. You get the energy of it,
Who are some of the bands that have really moved you or?
Well, I think it changed over the years. When I was younger, because I was just in a different state of mind and was struggling a lot, I listened to a lot of really heavy music. So when I was a kid, it was like all about Black Sabbath and, then into like 80s heavy metal. And then there was like a punk rock phase and all kinds of different phases. But I would say now the music I most relate to and probably just play, well, I'd say most of the time here in the house, I play some kind of mantras or Icaros, spiritual music, world music, that kind of stuff, just kind of like background music that's more kind of
non-lyrical,
just indigenous, just innate human music. But like the music, if you made me make a desert island,
right? You
deserted island playlist,
yeah,
it's like Beatles, Stones, Pink Floyd, Neil Young,
Zepp fan at all?
Yeah, Zeppelin, like I like their mellow songs now. It's
like Thank You and 10 Years
Going to
Gone
California,
and going to
California. Like the stuff that's kind of too rocking is a little, I don't know. That music, like really rocking music, is a bit jarring on my nervous system at this point in life. So if I listen to something like that, I'll skip the loud songs. Same with the Stones. Like I want to listen to like Angie and not Brown Sugar or something. Like I like the ballads and slower tempo songs, but I would say like classic rock, kind of just Americana rock, whether it's from America or not, but that blending of blues and country and the Grateful Dead,
John Cougar,
just like good old like American rock and roll, basically. That's probably, if I had to make my deserted island playlist, it'd probably be that. But I figured out if you make that playlist, if you pick double albums, you get twice as much money.
Dude,
twice as much music. I mean,
years ago,
Exile on Main Street, the Beatles' White Album,
Yes Songs.
Yeah, I think there's a Pink Floyd double album. Whatever the double albums are. But it's funny. What interesting thing, and this is such a tangent, and then we'll wrap it up. I swear, for the people still listening, like, oh my God, guys,
where'd these guys go?
Yeah,
what country?
Blame it on this goddamn black box right here. But with music, it's the great communicator, and it's just the way that we have a universal language,
right?
And it has such an ability to alter the way that you feel,
State change, man.
Yeah, like whether you want to go deeper into a feeling that you need to experience, or you're just like, God, get me out of here. I need to change it. And that, I think when I was a kid, that Jimi Hendrix is what did that. It was just like, oh, I'm in a different universe.
Yeah, I got to help establish a company called Trike. Trike, three-wheeled scooter you stand on, and you use camber thrust to make it go. So you jerk it left and right to make it go. And I used to live right above the Columbia River. So I had this little house, and and you'd go down, and it was about a half mile down to the river or quarter mile down to the river. And so I would put on Dirty Vegas. Like I had this very specific list of, when you finally get into the pure curation of music and you go, this song is the one I launch with. I launch with this Genesis tune, right? Dance on a Volcano. Then I go to Dirty Vegas, and then I go to, and you can literally articulate your mood, your creativity, your innovation, your energy, right? Your follow through, your sensitivity, all of that through these kind of musical passages. They become your muse.
You just reminded me, my Get Up and Go song, like if I do a talk or something publicly, is the Stones' Can't You Hear Me Knocking?
Dude,
that's like,
well, come on.
You put headphones on and put that song on loudly. I mean, it's going to make you feel something. It's so groovy. That's my one. That's my one.
It is. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. That's perfect.
The last thing I wanted to cover with you, and we'll get out of here, and I'll probably say it in the outro, but I meant to say this earlier. We're going to put the show notes for this episode at lukestory.com/Noots, Noots.
Awesome.
And within there, we'll also have a link to the Nootopia stuff, and I'm sure a discount code or something. I'll cover that in the intro and the outro. But circling back to the microdosing, and then you mentioned, in certain times and places for certain people, macrodosing could have benefits, as you indicated. Is there anything in what you do that could be useful for recovery from some of those overstimulating experiences for people who are sitting in plant medicine ceremonies or, journeying in ways that are kind of really rocking their brain? And I ask that because I've noticed over the past few years in which I've really benefited from some of those experiences, I've kind of incrementally learned how to supplement, sometimes during and definitely after, to get me back to baseline. So the most obvious of this, I think, would be something like MDMA, where you're just really, and this is not something I'm particularly a fan of, but one, if I think what really gives you a bad hangover after a positive experience would be that, you're just, whatever is happening, you're depleting your serotonin, and people will take 5-HTP as a remedy for that. What's your take on, helping to sort of regenerate the overstimulation or the trashing our minerals or whatever's going on in that kind of experience?
That's actually a great question. We actually developed a analog to Molly that's an all-natural one that made it really big a few years ago called Katie. If you look up Katie, K-A-T-Y, in like Playboy magazine, Katie, and you'll probably get a bunch of other Katie's on there.
Where are we going with this?
But I think Magnetic Mag did it, and EDM and YourEDM.com did reviews of that as well. And it was essentially, I wanted to make a non-neurodestructive equivalent to Molly that had enough euphoria that you would feel good. You might not be fully rolling, but you might be partially rolling. And then when you came out of it, you felt better than when you went in, versus wanting to hide away in a corner for a couple days while your dopamine and serotonin recovered, right? So the Power Solution is actually really, really great for that. And Gobalicious, those two together work really well. When I say together, like taken the same day, because they're going to do a lot of restorative neurotransmitter restoration. This, though, is your baby. Is Collagenius, because, here's the kind of trick, is when we started doing those extractions and coming up with this kind of final formulation, this is for every dose, which is 2 scoops in like 6 ounces of water or in coffee or whatever, however you like to take it. That's the equivalent of 1.5 pounds of pure mushroom extract. So it's not, it ain't your mama's coffee. So the cool part of that is that the BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, is one of the keys to repairing the brain because of the neurogenesis that it experiences. So this is really powerful. Those two are incredibly powerful. And the Apex is your baby. Like take Apex and brain flow together, and the oxygenation of the brain, which is going to then release a bunch of the toxins and the rest of it. Also restoring your neurochemicals, especially acetylcholine, huge, because that, and of course the dopamine will be, or the serotonin will be restored as well. Remember, the gut is the majority of the serotonin, right? It's 90 to 96% or 94%. And the rest of it is in the brain. And the vagus nerve just transfers and said, hey, I've got a bunch of serotonin down here. I think maybe you want some up here. And that signaling component is really important. So you want to restore those chemicals, and those, the Power Solution and Nectar X are really great for that. Again, when you get into the power solution, that aggression is just going into ketosis combined with the neurotropics. So neurotropics and because it basically just says, I'm going to run on ketones right now for a while instead of glucose. Brain loves glucose. Brain needs glucose. So if I run on ketones, now I've got a very, very limited scope of range, and I'm going to stay within that range. That's why the super focus activity that happens under that.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm sure because I've done a number of shows about different plant medicines and stuff, and I'm sure people are listening that have had like a San Pedro or mushroom headache, which is like a headache.
Oh my God.
like no other. I'm sure they'll be appreciative of that resource.
If you want to potentiate, like one of the ways to explore some of the psychedelics and have less of a potential hangover effect is preload with nootropics and then take those components. You can make a 1/4 gram of psilocybin act like 2 grams of psilocybin by just potentiating with nootropics. This is not a recommendation. This is just saying, because what we're doing is we're giving you all these valuable precursors to the neurochemicals that you're going to be modulating with those components. And it'll give you a much more expanded experience while not depleting the key neurochemicals because, again, we've got the precursors loaded in there. So you get an amplified experience with less dose. Minimum viable dose is the best dose. With less dose. And you're going to have enough of the neurochemical components to recover later on because you're going to be accelerating that usage of those, right? But you're not going to burn them out now. So now you come out of it and you go, feel great.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, man.
Noted. I was noticing in your formulations an absence of methylene blue, and that's something that is becoming increasingly popular as a nootropic.
Thank you, Dr. Ted.
Yeah, Ted's been on the show a few times, and
Trochi Ted, man.
Yeah, I love methylene blue for a number of different applications. Is that something you've ever looked at including or playing with?
It's funny that you asked that because it's now coming into a number of our products.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
We're not doing the spray just because, it's cool. Ted's got the and what we're doing the reason that we're doing it is one, it's a really, really powerful monoamine oxidase A inhibitor. There's monoamine oxidase A and B. It's a really powerful monoamine oxidase A inhibitor and a reversible one, meaning that it doesn't stick and then suddenly that enzyme doesn't come back. It does it really well and it's very long lasting. It takes very little, like less than 1 milligram to be super effective. And we play basically whack-a-mole with the FDA on a regular basis.
Right.
Is we will have an extract that's been legal for forever. It'll start going into what they call the gray zone, right? And so they'll send us an alert saying, hey, this is going to be, we're watching this right now. It's a watch list. And they say, we're watching this right now. A great example of that is hordenine. So rye extract called hordenine, for some reason, has suddenly gone into the watch list. So it's a super effective, super great natural monoamine oxidase inhibitor. And so the way for us to address that was to go, okay, cool, FDA, you guys lead, we follow. What we're going to do is we're going to move towards methylene blue as a component to do that instead.
Oh, cool.
As well as some other stuff. But
yeah.
But it's a way for us to work through that and continue to get, and of course, it also is a performance improvement. We don't do anything that's just a direct replacement or that'll make it worse. Every quarter, we like our products to get about 10% better, meaning that we look at every formula on a regular basis and go, what could make this better? What new discoveries, molecules? We have I think we have 9 or 10 new molecules, 12 new molecules that we're implementing into our existing products to make them functionally better, experientially better. So every quarter, you're going to see this improvement in the product, not just because you're filling out your intake and feedback forms and we're making it closer to your physiology and neurology, including the changes you make, but also because we have new discoveries that are coming through. Or our team in Bosnia is saying, hey, guess what we discovered?
Wow.
Masszymes. You know what Masszymes is.
Yeah, the Bioptimizers. They're one of our longtime show sponsors. And I was thinking about this actually yesterday. I I ate a bunch of suspect food because I just succumbed to the cravings. And normally I take, when I'm home, literally I take a Masszymes with every single meal. And I put it in my morning smoothie. I just empty one in there. But yesterday I took a whole handful of them. And I was like, I actually think that that's helped my digestion probably more than anything else that I've done. Is just like adding enzymes when I eat, like, or the right enzymes at least. So
Right,
yeah,
right.
Masszymes, huge fan.
So Masszymes 4.0 is about to come out. We're finishing up the formulation now. We, over the last year, have really invested in our Bosnian team to take the components of Masszymes and then look at potentiating elements. Because what we do with this stuff is potentiate, right? We take this molecule and say, how do we make it more powerful, more better, last longer, more effective, more bioavailable? That's potentiation. So that you get a greater benefit from either the same amount or a lesser amount. And we did the same thing with Masszymes and P3OM now and Capex and the rest. So it'll be around 250% more powerful, more effective as an enzyme in this next upcoming version.
Damn.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah, that's cool, especially because I'm close to out. I just get a bunch of bottles of it and I put it in a big jug so I can just reach in and grab them and I have to unscrew a little bottle.
Hit me. When we get done with this, I'll give you my email address
all right, cool.
And hit me and I'll put you on my short beta list for people that want to be.
I'll do it because digestion in general is kind of one of the last frontiers for me. I've fixed so many things in my body and brain over the years, but digestion is still finicky for me. So I have to definitely have other inputs and other support to make it work right.
I'm with you, brother.
Yeah. Well, hot damn, dude. I think we covered everything. Thank you for your generosity of time. Sometimes, I had 3 pages of questions for you and, I can kind of feel some guest waning, at a certain point. Because I'm just like, I never know when I'm going to talk to this person again. So I'm going to ask every single question.
As we're going into Stones tunes and where Jimi Hendrix arrived.
I'm going to ask every question, and not just for myself, but, I want to be that podcast where someone listens and they're like, why didn't he ask him about X, Y, and Z? Like, I'm trying to think of everything the audience would want to know. And I'm glad you were on board to, help me fulfill that.
This is great.
So thank you so much.
Plus, I love your spirit. I love what you're doing. And I think that it's really hard. Like I love, Dr. Berg, and I think Hyman is awesome. And I'm huge fan of Zach Bush and what he's doing with surface recovery, right? Soil recovery and those things. And I think that the more your information gets out, the more people can realize that they're not a victim to circumstance. They're obviously not a victim to the things that might hold them under, like the drugs or meds or anything else. And the other is that there's a powerful route through those things, and there are a bunch of tools available to people. Because I didn't know that tools were available. Had I really taken a look and said, holy shit, I could develop something that would make Tish feel better than she does on oxycodone. She did the literal thing where she went to the doctors and she said, hey, I think I've got carpal tunnel. She didn't have carpal tunnel, but it was hard for them to diagnose. Just so that she could get them to slice her open and repair so she could get oxycodone.
Oh, man. Yeah. Well, I appreciate what you guys are doing. And I appreciate what I get to do, man. I get to talk to people like you and find solutions that are viable and innovative. And it's just amazing. Like, I'm thinking back to the first 10 years I was sober were so difficult. I mean, my brain was just fried. And I try to not live in the past, but I'm like, God, if someone had given me this freaking black box, dude, then I could have had a much easier time and probably been a much better person to those about me as well. It wasn't just that I was suffering. And as a result, I'm not sure. I know I was an asshole a lot of the time.
Oh, yeah.
I was just hurting.
Oh, yeah. You're broken and you don't know how to regulate any of your neurochemicals and cortisol and the rest. I mean, my girlfriend will tell me, you need to go take that bike out now, or you need to go hit the weights or whatever, because that cortisol will build up and I'll suddenly be at this, because I'm, because I have this thing I want to accomplish and I'm driven by the reward and, and that this I've used Nectar X to get so many people off of destructive drugs as a component. It may not be the whole solution, but it restores enough of their thinking that they can start thinking clearly, and it gives them enough energy that they can start executing well. And if you can do that, there's enough little elements of hope and success that they get, that they go, you know what, this is better than that thing that I used to be, that owned me.
Yeah, I got an idea.
Tell me, man.
We'll take the mold-infused Folgers coffee out of 12-step group meetings. And we'll make a big party jug of Nectar X, and just do a
that's such
trial.
great-
Get people drinking, all the newcomers drinking that for a while and see what happens.
I once had a group of people that I didn't want to take any investors in my company, but a bunch of people that were my former investors in other companies and other things that I had done said, hey man, I heard you're doing this weird thing and NZT and Limitless and all that stuff. What is that? So I brought them together and I gave them cups of NZT Nectar X. And then I just watched as I'm on stage trying to present, I watched as they came alive. It was so cool.
Wow.
Because you see and suddenly
Yeah.
they're at this new state. And you're going, all right, I got them. And so I didn't pitch or anything. I just shared how neurochemicals work and here's how this works on the brain and stuff. And they said, well, we're in. I don't want your money, but I wanted you to have this experience.
Right.
They became great customers. So
awesome, man. Well, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, brother.
I think we've done it. Until next time, take care.
Peace out.